5 मिनट स्टार्ट नहीं करना? बताओ, 4 मिनट रुक जाओ, मैं क्वेश्चंस लिख लेता हूँ. So good evening everyone. So myself Himanshu Khatri and we'll be discussing the previous year questions of world history, modern history, post-independence India of 2020, 21 and 2022, right? So therefore that is the agenda. And so I was just simply writing the questions. कुछ pending है, वो फिर question आने पे करेंगे. So in 2020, the first question which was asked was this: evaluate policies of Curzon and their long-term implications on the national movements. Right? On the national movements means on the Indian national movement. Right? So first of all, the aspect is the student, he can begin with a general introduction that what were that Lord Curzon was the Governor General of was the Viceroy from the year 1899 to 1905, and he adopted following policies. Right, introduction can be very simple from that perspective. So what are the overall, what is going to be the structure? So if you look at Curzon, 9905 means 1899 to 1905. That is a code which can be generated personally, right? So evaluate policies of Curzon. So first of all, do we know the policies of Curzon? Only then we will be able to evaluate it, and only then we will be able to talk about the implications or the impact of those policies, right? So Curzon, he had adopted policies. For example, first of all, he is bringing what he call as Calcutta Municipal Corporation Amendment Act. He is bringing that in 1899. Then second is Indian Official Secrets Amendment Act. Then next he is bringing Indian Universities Act. And then he is bringing what you call as Bengal Partition. October 1905, right? So these are the policies of Lord Curzon, right? Right? So the introduction can be like, there is a structure, right? So you can write down point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, and along with it elaboration. So Calcutta Municipal Corporation Amendment Act. So first of all, you would have to describe that what it was. Only then, in a one line, only then you can evaluate it. So basically, the whole idea is that he did not, he is authoritarian personality, and he does not want Indians in position of authority, right? So on one hand, there was this Ripon, 1880 till 1884, who is known as father of the Panchayati Raj institutions or the local self government, right? Who at the ground level, at the district board level, as well as at the municipality level, he made those bodies democratic in nature so that the Indians, they can head those bodies, right? And on the other side, because he is authoritarian, so he is basically reducing the number of elected members. He is reducing the number of elected members so that Indians, they are not able to be in position of authority even in the municipalities, which is the third tier of the government in the urban areas, right? So therefore that becomes the aspect. So therefore we come to know, our evaluation is what? Our evaluation comes to the conclusion that he is an authoritarian personality, anti-democratic, does not want to share power with the Indians, right? So therefore what is our result? Our result comes out, so basically decreased number of elected members. And therefore, what is our evaluation? That he was authoritarian in nature. He was authoritarian in nature, did not want to share power with the Indians. And this is going to, implication wise, we'll see, we'll try to conclude overall, right? Obviously, it is going to lead to anger among the Indians who are demanding what you call as self-government by this particular point of time, right? Second component is Indian Official Secrets Amendment Act. So what is this? Basically, as a student, we need to understand that in government, there are a lot of communications which take place within the government. A lot of files are there within the government. Some of the files, they are considered as general files. They are open to the RTI Act also, but there are certain documents which are considered as secret or top secret, and they are outside of the purview of, for example, the RTI. They are outside of the purview of general media commenting upon it, that why the government took that decision, what is in that file. And if the media or the press, it reveals that information, then it is violation of the Official Secrets Act, right? Official means government. There are some information which are secrets, which if those secrets they are revealed, then there will be a punitive measure against you. Now, who defines what is the official secret? Whether only very limited number of files or very limited number of work is going to be official secret, or any work which the government does, that is official secret. So basically here in the Indian Official Secrets Amendment Act, he expanded the canvas of what is secret and what is not secret. Why? Because he does not like the press criticizing the actions of the government. So therefore, again, he is acting as an authoritarian person who does not want criticism of the press, right? And at this particular point of time, extremists, they have not risen, and therefore the major activity which is done by the moderate leaders, it is using the press. So therefore, in this sense, he can target the Indian national movement also. Because how are the moderates leading the Indian national movement? What is their method? Their method is of writing articles discussing the policies of the government, actions of the government, criticizing the actions of the government, and therefore by curbing the freedom of the press, are you not curbing the Indian national movement itself? Right? So therefore, that is the idea. So basically what it did, basically it increased the scope of what's secret, or what work of the government is secret, right? And as a result, therefore, since main method of moderates who are active at this point of time is equal to using press, so therefore curbed press, curbed freedom of press, as well as INM. He's curbing the Indian national movement, also he's curbing the press, right? So this is our evaluation of the nature of Curzon, or this is our evaluation of his policies, that what he is doing with these policies, he is not just curbing the freedom of press, he is curbing the Indian national movement. Next is Indian Universities Act of 1904, right? So here, plus, okay, so here what happens is, he believed, Curzon, he was of the opinion, from the layman perspective, if you see, all the politicians who are at present active, right, most or all of them have had a very good political career or a very good political beginning when they were in college, right? That is when they were Yuva Netas, right? But till the point of time, schooling is there, very less exposure is there to any kind of politics. It is in the colleges that exposure is given or exposure is available, where the youth starts participating on the political questions, start thinking on the political questions, on the political issues of the day. And therefore the universities and the colleges, they are the ground where future leaders are prepared, right? So therefore that basic understanding should be there. And from that understanding, Lord Curzon is coming to this conclusion that universities are factories of sedition, right? Factories of sedition means that here, instead of, it is the Lord Curzon's view that instead of spending time on doing PhD, instead of spending time on studying, the students, they are developing more and more INM ideas, more and more ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity, modern nationalism, and they are becoming more and more anti-British while they are in the colleges. So therefore he wants to bring the universities under his control so that he is able to ensure that future INM leadership, it is not prepared, or the youth does not become active against the British or does not become seditious against the British, right? So again, he wants to curb the Indian national movement, which is taking place not just outside the colleges, but it is also taking place inside the colleges. That is the layman understanding of the thing. And therefore, so technically what this Indian Universities Act did, it decided, it brought the universities under the government control, right? So from the purpose of exam, we can write down that it basically brought universities under government control, under government control. What kind of government control? How can the government control universities? So for example, in the universities, there are something called Senate. Senate is a decision making, right? Senate decisions, they can be vetoed by the government or they can be overturned by the government. So therefore, decisions which are taken by the Senate in the universities, they can be overturned. What kind of decisions? For example, decision that who will be allowed to do PhD, who will not be allowed to do PhD. So therefore, government now wanted to control that who will do PhD and who will not do PhD, right? This kind of scenario. Plus those PhDs, right? So those PhDs, but who can do PhD? Take this kind of scenario. Who can do PhD? Okay, that is base. In more formal language in the exam, you will write down that the government could now control that who is admitted to, who is enrolled to do, PhD and who is not enrolled to do PhD. And second point is, for example, it reduced the tenure of PhDs. It reduced the tenure of PhD. That is, you are 10 years in the college, आपकी degree खत्म ही नहीं हो रही. So at times, even today it happens that people are having children also, living in the hostel, right? युवा नेता, वो युवा खत्म ही नहीं होता, ठीक है? PhD भी खत्म नहीं हो रही, ठीक है? People, they do multiple MAs also, this kind of scenario. So basically, decrease the tenure of the PhDs, right? And control the universities, bring them under their control. Similarly, another component was, in the exam, you will not get time to write down these many points also. So therefore, the conclusion is good enough for the purpose of exam, but just for the sake of this Indian Universities Act, for the sake of telling, for example, they could, which university which private college can be given recognition by the universities, that is also controlled by the government, right? For example, you are a nationalist Indian, right? You are, let's say, a person like Shri Aurobindo, and you set up a college, private college, which gives you nationalistic education, national education, right? And therefore, Lord Karchan would be like, I need to control which private colleges are able to get affiliation, right? So understand from that perspective. So basically, government could control affiliation. That is, which private college is given affiliation to private colleges, right? So therefore, again, what is the conclusion? Therefore, again, he wanted to hurt nationalism in the youth or hurt INM that involves the youth. That is the target. That is the target, right? On the positive side, here you can mention. On the positive side, here you can mention that he created something called, he tried to diversify. He diversified education. How did he diversify education? For example, right now we are present on Pusa Road, right? So this Pusa, it is in Bihar. So therefore, Pusa Institute, which goes into the agrarian research or agricultural research, it was established by a friend, a philanthropist who was a friend of Curzon, right? So therefore, he diversified education via establishment of Pusa Institute. And India was an agrarian economy, so this step is a good step. Plus, he also said that he will be spending 6 lakh rupees per annum on education. So what is the conclusion? He's basically saying, पढ़ाई करने आए हो, पढ़ाई करो, politics मत करो. He's basically trying to see that colleges, they should act only as the hub of intellectual education and not as a hub for political education, right? So therefore, curbed political education, right, but encouraged technical education. This is the conclusion or evaluation that we can make, right? And then next is the partition of Bengal, right? So if we discuss the partition of Bengal, right? So partition of Bengal, so this will form the major part, right? So in the exam, you would have to write only the headings here or only the initial part. You want to go to Pusa level, you want to go to diversification level, it will be good if in one line you can mention the other side of the story, the positive side of the story, right? But otherwise, try to create a gist out of it, right? Many bhi gist form mein likha hai. This is all gist, right? So this will be the heading, and there you simply say decreased elected members and therefore acted in an authoritarian manner. Second point, brought Indian Official Secrets Amendment Act to curb. So therefore, isko hata denge because this is for our understanding, to curb the freedom of press. And since press was the major tool of the moderates, therefore to hurt Indian national movement. So this is how these can be converted into one-line statements, and then we can move ahead towards what you call as partition of Bengal, which was his biggest decision, right? Right. So if you talk about partition of Bengal, some miscellaneous points can also be there. For example, he set up a police commission which resulted in establishment of provincial police services, right? So therefore he tried to, modernize the police. So that can be one aspect. He also brought Punjab Land Alienation Act 1900, which tried to basically put restriction on the transfer of land due to indebtedness. Punjab, it is a Mehalwari area. In Mehalwari area, most of the time Riyat becomes the owner of the property, and if you are owner of the property, you have to pay land revenue. To pay that land revenue, you have to take loans from the moneylenders. Most of the time you will not be able to repay this loan, so moneylender will come, he'll take away your property, and therefore causing landlessness. So therefore, wherever small person is owner of the land, he is going to have trouble with respect to payment of land revenue, right? So therefore, in simple one line we can mention that he acted in favor of the tenant Riyat by bringing Punjab Land Alienation Act, so the Riyat does not lose land right away if he has defaulted on the loans which he has taken from the moneylender, right? So when you take loan, कुछ गिरवी रखना पड़ता है ना पाजी, ठीक है? So you people used to mortgage their lands to take loan. If you are not able to pay back the loan, then the moneylenders will go to the court, and the court will pass an order that give the land to the moneylender, right? How can the government protect it? Maybe the government can bring a law which regulates the interest rates which can be charged by the moneylenders. Maybe the government can bring a law that interest on interest should not be there. That is, I took 100 rupees of loan, interest 4 rupees, let's say, then next year 104 rupees becomes a principal and uske upar 4%. So maybe this kind of regulation, it can be there. In the exam, obviously you will not go in such details. In one line you will write down that he acted in favor of the tenant Riyats of Punjab when he brought Punjab Land Alienation Act 1900 to prevent loss of land due to indebtedness. One line, done. What I said verbally was for the purposes of understanding, right? Next, majorly we come towards the what you call as Bengal partition of 1905, October 1905, right? So in the case of, and this will form the major aspect, right? So here you can begin with by saying that what was the British justification? What was the, to do evaluation, if I have to evaluate your answer, first I will see what is your answer, then I'll give some kind of counter opinion, then I have to come to a judgment with respect to evaluation. So fine. First we have to see that what the Britishers are saying. So their justification was this, right? Their justification was this. In the exam also you can draw this if you want, right? But for the purpose of understanding I am drawing this, right? And what can be the sentences which can be written in small, that I'll also tell. So for example, if this is your undivided, this is your Assam, right? And this is your undivided Bengal. This is your undivided Bengal, right? So basically what, and in this, what is the situation? There is this place called, there is this phenomenon or activity which is taking place in the form of Assam tea gardens, right? Then in Assam, then there is a railway. This is known as Assam Bengal Railways or Bengal Assam Railways. Then you have a port here, and the name of this port is Chittagong Port. Right? This Assam, it was a chief commissioner level province. CC province means union territory. In union territory, proper civil services cadre is not there, and proper chief minister, it is not there. So it was a CC province. That is proper legislative council, it is not there. Right? This was a situation that existed before 1905. Right? What did the Britishers did it? In 1905, by partitioning Bengal, they created something called this. They created something called this, and this was known as EBA. EBA means East Bengal and Assam. right? So therefore, what is their justification? Their justification is, right, so this diagram, if you want to draw, you can draw there, right, and you can populate it here also, otherwise you can write sentences, right? What is the sentence? Sentence is, they say, British justification, so how we will write in the exam? British justification of Bengal partition was, point number one, Bengal had a very large population, therefore for administrative convenience, partition was done. With EBA, with East Bengal and Assam, Assam could have a proper civil services cadre, resulting in better governance. Today for the UTs we have Agamut cadre, whereas if you are a full state, you have Maharashtra cadre, Bihar cadre, right? So full cadre, it is a feature of good governance that you have a proper cadre, because then the civil servants, they spend their whole life in a single state, therefore they are very, very knowledgeable about the state, and they can take, they'll think that this is their home, and therefore empathy wise also, experience wise also, knowledge wise also, they will be able to deliver better services, right? So own cadre for Assam can be there. Third point, there will be a single administration of Bengal Assam railways, leading to better performance. What is the meaning of this? Meaning of this is that if any railway line needs to be repaired, if any new station needs to be added, if any new railway needs to be, a train needs to be added, two governments would have to talk to each other, resolve their differences. But if there is only one single government, then these decisions, they will be faster. So therefore, there will be better functioning of Bengal Assam railways, right? Better functioning of Bengal Assam railways. Next component is, there will be a cheaper exit to the Assam tea gardens via the Chittagong port. Cheaper exit. When GST was not there in India, so when the goods, they moved from one state to another state, some domestic taxes they also used to apply. VAT will apply, octroi can also apply, this kind of scenario, right? So therefore, when GST came, we said that there will be ease of doing business, there will be more smoother movement of goods from one part of India to another part of India, right? So यहाँ पे GST तो है नहीं, GST is not here, right? So basically, when this will be a single province, then Assam tea gardens will have a port within their province, and therefore it will be easier, paperwork will be less, and other kind of taxes will be low if the Assam tea gardens wants to use the Chittagong port for export of Assam tea to the rest of the world. So there will be a cheaper outlet available to the Assam tea gardens via the Chittagong port. That is, cheaper export of tea will be possible if we create East Bengal and Assam in this particular manner, right? So therefore, that is their justification. Second component comes, so we give our reason, right? So therefore, what was the Indian stand or the reality? Reality was that the Britishers, they wanted to implement divide and rule. How they wanted to divide? They wanted to do divide and rule with goal of weakening, INM in Bengal, with goal of weakening INM in Bengal. So how can you weaken INM in Bengal? So, well, what is so special about Delhi? What is so special about Delhi? The thing which is special about Delhi is that it is capital, right? So therefore, otherwise, what differentiates Delhi from other kind of union territories? It is the capital. It is the seat of the government, and therefore, if any political activity takes place in Delhi, right, still the whole country will be publishing. Although we are a union territory, still the whole country will be publishing a news, and it will become a national news, right? So therefore, if you are doing political activity in Bengal, in Madras, in Bombay presidencies, then highest impact of your political activity will be in Bengal, right? And therefore, lead role was played by Bengal in the Indian national movement till the point of time Delhi became the capital in the year 1911. Right? And Lord Curzon was frustrated with this growing Indian national movement in Bengal, and therefore he wanted to reduce the Indian national movement activity in Bengal, right? So how to do that, right? So he is playing some divide and rule. How? Acha. There is another one simple sentence that you should remember for the purpose of answering this. At least you should understand. Uneven growth of Western education. Uneven growth of Western education led to uneven growth of INM. Right? Why? Western education, it resulted in thoughts of modern nationalism. Right? You would study American Revolution, you would study French Revolution, you will study about liberty, equality, fraternity, you will study about unification of Germany, right? Germans, they should be one, you will study about unification of Italy, Italians, they should be one. When you are studying all of this Western education, when you are studying that Britain democracy and what are the benefits of democracy, right? So therefore your mind starts becoming more and more nationalistic. But the Britishers, they introduced Western education in a lopsided manner, right? So Macaulay's Minute on Indian Education, 1835, it focused on bringing schools and colleges only in urban areas and not in the rural areas. And there also in Bengal Presidency, Bombay and Madras Presidency, and within them also only in the Bombay city, in the Calcutta city, in the Madras city. As a result, what happens is there is more nationalistic leaders from these areas and the communities which live in these areas as compared to other parts of India, right? So this is the kind of, as a result in Bengal, who was leading the Indian national movement? Bengalis, that is Bengali speaking, because around Calcutta, Bengalis will be there, not Bhojpuri speaking population, not Odia speaking population. In Calcutta, Bengalis will be there, right? And education was not free, right? And at that point of time, this kind of a correlation was there that the lower caste, they were not rich, right? So Indian national movement was dominated by Bengali Bhadralok, that is Bengalis who are upper caste Hindus, right? This is the situation. So A, they are Bengali, B, they are Bengali, and second, they are Hindus. So who is leading the Indian national movement? Bengali Hindus, this kind of scenario. So now come back to our question. Right, I gave you the background. Now come back to the question. Right, ये सब हम वहाँ पे नहीं लिखेंगे exam में. We will not be writing all of this. This is the background, so that what I am going to write here, that you are able to understand. So Indian stand is that Bengal partition was a divide and rule tactic with goal of weakening of Indian national movement in Bengal. As first point, divide Bengalis these 4 points you write down. This is the Indian stand. When you are dividing Bengal, then you are dividing Bengalis also. So therefore divided, the unity will be less, right? Because movements, they can take place at province level, right? Elections, if they ever take place, they will take place at province level, right? Mudde jo honge, issues, they can vary province by province, they can vary. This kind of scenario. So divide Bengalis into 2 provinces, right? Second point, appease elite Muslims. Why? As East Bengal and Assam was going to be a Muslim majority province. So Britishers, they are trying to divide the Indians on the basis of religion. They are saying that Muslims, you do not participate in the Indian national movement. Elite Muslims, you do not participate in the Indian national movement. See, we are creating a Muslim majority province. So elite Muslims will ask, so mera kya fayda? How will I benefit? Elections will take place, even if indirect elections will take place. In 1909, ICA 1909, right? Or whenever, even if nomination takes place, in the provincial legislative councils, you will be able to become member. MLA ban payenge aap, right? If Muslims are in majority, and if by chance any kind of elections take place, or even if nomination is done, then who will become MLA? You will become MLA. If tomorrow ever someone gets the chance that of becoming a minister from among the Indians, so at the EBA level, who will have more chance of becoming a minister, right? You will be having more chance, right? So therefore, we are giving you a share of power. Don't you want it? So the elite Muslim leaders, they're like, yes, we want it, right? We'll be pro-British. Muslim League, which is set up in 1906, it declared that we are going to be pro-British, right? So divide and rule. Then Bengali speakers, they will be in minority in West Bengal. The division was such that Bengali speaking population was going to be in minority in West Bengal, right? Now, when elections will take place in West Bengal, I am a Bengali INM leader. I am standing in elections. Although direct elections, they will come only in 1919. Indirect elections, they will come in 1909, right? Grain of some kind of indirect elections had come in the 1892 also. But anyways, if any kind of politics, let's say elections, if they take place at the province level, right, at the province level, and I am a Bengali Indian National Movement leader, you are the voters, majority of you are not Bengalis, my chances of coming to power will be less, right? Second point, many movements, they can be started at province level, because provinces, they have their own issues. So if I am a Bengali INM leader and I want to start a movement, right, you do not feel, majority of you may not feel associated with me because you are not Bengali, right? So therefore my support base is getting hurt. It is being shrunk in West Bengal. Similarly, Hindus will be in minority in EBA. So I am a Hindu Bengali leader now working in East Bengal and Assam, right? The issue is caste, religion, these things, they matter in the politics, right? So again, Western education is also there, more among the Hindus, right? Upper caste Hindus, right? So Hindus, they are in minority in EBA. So therefore my support base is again coming down. So basically you have designed it to hurt this scenario. So this is how you can answer this particular question, right? Next component is implications, long-term implications. What I have verbally said much more. In the exam, you'll write only this much, right? This is just to provide a base. Long-term implications, right? When you talk about long-term implications, so what are the things which are changing, right? First is, there was a rise of such nationalism. This is exact statement in the books. There was a rise of such nationalism which never came down. Matlab, level of nationalism increased in the Swadeshi movement, right? Implication is basically, first you talk about this resulted in Swadeshi movement, right? From 1905 till 1911, right? Second component, you mentioned that there was rise of nationalism. Third component, you can mention that in this particular rise of nationalism, foundation of mass politics were laid. Because Swadeshi movement was the first movement where there was attempt was made to involve the masses. Swadeshi movement was also the first movement where focus was there on involving the workers to go on strikes, right? So can we say foundation of working class movement was also laid here? Foundation of working class movement was also laid here, right? Apart from this, in Swadeshi movement, we know that from 1905, in the exam you will not be writing this, so bracket में डाला के, from 1905 to 1908, there was this activity by the masses, and from 1908 till 1911, there was revolutionaries which were active. So can we say that Swadeshi movement is also the movement where for the first time revolutionaries with their revolutionary methods of assassinations of the officials, etc., that is getting activated. So can we say it is leading, right? The Curzonian administration, his authoritarianism, and यहाँ पे ना try to pick words from this. When you are putting the long-term implication, the fault line will be, you may be tempted to focus only on Swadeshi, but try to pick words which you have mentioned here, right? So the question is same, but the words which are used are, what was the long-term impact of Curzonian administration? Answer is coming from long-term impact of Swadeshi, right? But क्योंकि wording ऐसा है, so therefore try to focus on these aspects, right? How will you focus? Therefore the insert कर दो. Therefore Curzon's authoritarianism, as described by the above 4 points, or as described by the above, resulted in following, राइट, ऐसा भी कर सकते हैं. Foundation of revolutionary activities is taking place here. Fourth component you mentioned that new methods they came into operation. So some of the methods they were used for the first time, and these methods became permanent. These methods they became permanent in future Indian national movement. These methods they became permanent in future Indian national movement. And what are these methods? So these methods are basically of non-cooperation, civil disobedience, constructive work. Most of the students they will not be mentioning constructive work, they will be mentioning only non-cooperation and civil disobedience, right? But constructive work is also very, very important, right? So what is non-cooperation? Non-cooperation is boycott, and second is promotion of Swadeshi goods and Swadeshi institutions. Boycott of kiska? Swadeshi goods, British goods and British institutions. In the exam you can stop till here because everyone understand what are the institutions, but just for the sake, what are the institutions? For example, institutions they are British courts. Institutions they are, for example, in the form of British educational institutions, right? Aisa, these are the institutions, right? They can be civil services also from one perspective, but yes, civil services से Indians they were not civil servants, तो वहाँ से resign इतना क्या करेंगे, बहुत कम थे, right? So how do you boycott courts? How will you boycott courts? You will boycott courts by doing two things. This I am explaining. Now हमारा आंसर ये पे खत्म हो जाएगा, ठीक है? I am explaining. How do you boycott courts? You boycott courts A by not filing cases, and second, if you are a lawyer, then not fighting cases. Then education. How do you boycott? By not enrolling in the institution, education institution, or if you are a teacher, then by not teaching there. Right? This is how you can do boycott. Civil services exam, मैं नहीं देता UPSC. Boycott. ठीक है, मत दो, ठीक है. But the point is, for example, by not giving the exam, right? Exam which is introduced since 1853, first exam in 1855, ठीक है, resigning from the services, that is also kind of boycott, ठीक है. So ऐसा boycott the goods, so we will not be buying the two kind of goods will not be buying, one which are being imported from Britain into India, and second, in India there is some British factory owner who is producing the goods, so we will also not buy those goods, right? This kind of scenario, right? Second, another thing which we can do is how we can boycott. See, ये मैं next, for example, within this you can mention strikes by the workers in foreign owned enterprises. So there you write down strikes by the workers in foreign owned enterprises. But what is the intellectual aspect of it? Goods has two parts, demand and supply. See, I am conducting this session not with a focus on simply writing down or speaking an answer. Otherwise, I can simply speak an answer. और आजकल तो आप चैट जीपीटी पे भी कर सकते हो, है ना? तुम करते हो ना, ठीक है? जितना स्माइल करोगे चैट जीपीटी करेंगे, ठीक है? एक्स्ट्रा स्माइल. Anyways, so the focus is not that we simply, I simply say, उसका background I have to tell that why should my students be able to write this particular sentence which I am writing here, right? So that's why a lot of things are going to be in addition to what you are going to write in the answer, okay? So, and therefore, what is the concept? Goods, right? The goal of the Swadeshi movement was not just to hurt the demand of the goods, but also to hurt the supply of the goods, right? And to hurt the supply, why? Because, for example, person like him, right? He says, no, I'm not, into this Swadeshi movement, right? I'm not boycotting for whatever reasons. There were multiple reasons, right? So he will go to the shop and he will say, भैया एक वो made in Britain वाला biscuit देना, ठीक है? Please give me one, made in Britain good, right? So therefore, he should also not be able to buy The shopkeeper should say, sir, maal piche se nahi aa raha hai, right? The goods, they are not coming from the back, right? So therefore, I will force you to participate in Swadeshi like this by hurting the supply. So supply of the British goods, that can be hurt by doing strikes in foreign owned enterprises, right? So like Liaquat Hussain, C.R. Das, Bipin Chandra Pal, they led strikes of the workers in the foreign owned enterprises, so that the supply of the goods, British made goods, they are not available. Demand, you appeal to the people, right, that please do not buy the British goods, please buy the Indian goods, right? So therefore you see that the strikes, they are actually connected with the boycott, right? That is the interesting part of it. Anyways, but in the exam you can simply write down, but yeah, how can you get slightly more marks if you mention this sentence that methods, new methods were developed whereby not just the demand of the British goods, but even the supply was sought to be hurt in form of appealing to the people to buy made in India goods or to buy Swadeshi goods, and leading strikes by the workers in the foreign owned enterprises. So yes, you have said the same thing like any other student, but you have brought a small analytical aspect of demand and supply. So therefore the answer checker will feel that your answer is, you know, self-generated. It is kind of like fresh. It will bring freshness to the answer checker, that some student is applying his brains, right? So aisa, be a thinking student, always question by part of things, right? So that is what is there. Civil disobedience, right? You should basically know that civil disobedience, it basically means breaking of unjust laws. Breaking of unjust laws, right? New method. And constructive work, why? So constructive, new methods of constructive work which were repeatedly used by Mahatma Gandhi in future. And in general you can mention, so first you mention constructive work whereby apolitical activity for generating unity in community, and promoting self-reliance, promoting skilling, self-reliance, and Swadeshi goods, Swadeshi education and Swadeshi goods. So वैसे what is constructive work? NGO like activity, as simple as that, right? Simply whatever any NGO will do, right? That is constructive work. Okay? Whatever any NGO does, that is a constructive work. That's why it is called as apolitical activity, right? So this kind of scenario. So basically you briefly define new methods were introduced in the exam. If you're feeling every student will be different, some student may feel that the previous slides we have given more space, now the space is relatively less, right? So in that case you simply mention that new methods were introduced like non-cooperation, that included boycott and promotion of Swadeshi goods and institutions, comma, civil disobedience whereby unjust laws were broken, and constructive work whereby community unity, self-reliance and nationalistic education and Swadeshi goods were promoted. Full stop. Right? So this is how you can write it in one simple sentence. But to be able to write this, you need to understand slight background ki hota kya hai. Okay? So therefore that's why I have made you write down this. Right? Then other methods that you can mention, that innovative methods like jatras. Jatras are basically theatre or street plays. Right? Jatras, Prabhat Fairies. Prabhat Fairies where there was use of religion and channelization of religion into political energy. Prabhat means morning. So we go for morning worship, and after doing worship, all of us now start marching on the streets. So therefore this is use of religion for the purposes of conversion of, like science mein kehte na, potential energy converted into kinetic energy. Similarly, political energy converted into, religious energy converted into political energy, right? So jatras, Prabhat Fairies, right? These kind of. Second point, next aspect you can mention is nationalistic symbols. For the first time, certain nationalistic symbols, they became nationalistic symbols, they became prominent. For example, Vande Mataram became the national anthem of the future Indian national movement. Acha, iska conclusion you can write down. Above methods were used were very highly used by Mahatma Gandhi or in the Gandhian phase. ऐसा आप करके लिख सकते हैं. Asterisk symbols. So here you talk about Bande Mataram. Amar Shonar Bangla, My Golden Bengal was written by Rabindranath Tagore. Later on became the national anthem of Bangladesh. Right? So Bande Mataram, these symbols, they became very, very prominent. Right? That is what you can mention. Apart from this, so therefore conclusion, it can be that what will be the conclusion? So conclusion, it can be that Curzonian administration represented authoritarianism, embedded in British colonialism. Embedded in British colonialism. Well, this is just one example, right? And embedded in British colonialism. And any sentence that you use, but उसका soul क्या लिखना है हम यहाँ पे चाह रहे हैं. The soul is, you must have seen movies. In movies, when do you come to know? In movies, when do you come to know that Bahubali is a hero? है ना? तो ये क्लास में ही बोलता हूँ मैं. But when do you come to know that Bahubali is a hero? When there is a villain, then you come to know that this person is actually a hero, right? So when there was attack by that person who used to have Rung Ta, when there was this attack, then you come to know that Bahubali is not just physically powerful, but he's also ethically, better, right? So in most of the movies, first there is rise of villain, and then there is rise of hero, right? So if our hero is Indian national movement, then it is because of people like Lytton, 1876-80. It is because of opposition to relatively good people like Ripon, 1880-84, Ilbert Bill controversy. It is because of villains like Curzon, 1899-1905, that hero will rise. Stronger the villain, stronger the hero. Right? So basically, Curzonian administration represented authoritarianism embedded in British colonialism, and this motivated or energized, the masses or energized the masses to rise against British colonialism, and we moved permanently away from petitions to mass action. So basically, Curzonian administration revealed, right? Liberals, मतलब मैं बस समझाने के लिए बोलता रहा हूँ. Liberals, they have this, घूंघट सा. Liberals, they have this coverage, right? That the imperialism, it is hidden behind some kind of a veil. When Curzon came, so therefore he revealed the ugly face of British colonialism. But that is the idea. So that soul will become part of this conclusion. Curzonian administration represented authoritarianism, right? Or it revealed the authoritarianism which is embedded in any colonial relationship, and therefore this motivated the masses to rise against the British colonialism and strengthened Indian national movement, and from petitions we move to mass action. So overall, this is the impact of the Curzonian administration or his authoritarianism, right? So that is the scenario. Question में ज़्यादा टाइम लग गया, इतना टाइम बाकी क्वेश्चंस में नहीं लगाएंगे, ठीक है. Second aspect is, since decade of 1920s, Indian national movement acquired various ideological strands and therefore expanded its social base. Full stop. Discuss. So why 1920s is famous? It is because here the Gandhian struggle, it is emerging, right? Indian national movement acquired various ideological strands. That means we have to talk not just about Mahatma Gandhi, we have to talk about other ideologies also, which will cater to different kind of social sections, right? So basically you can mention that since 1920s, different ideological strands in the INM emerged, which expanded the social base. Introduction can be as simple as that. But what will be the first aspect? So first you can mention the Gandhian ideology. So Gandhian ideology was inclusive, plus his method of non-violence, attracted or allowed, his method of non-violence allowed mass participation. Example, it will allow participation of women also, because method is non-violence, so therefore it will be relatively more convenient for women to participate, for the old aged people to participate, right? Even a child can do boycott of the British goods. I'll not have British chocolate, I'll have only Indian chocolate, right? So therefore I'm just trying to give you an example. So method of non-violence allowed mass participation, example of women, of the aged people, right? This kind of scenario. Second, because his ideology was inclusive, therefore he always tried to focus on upper caste, lower caste unity. He always tried to focus on Hindu-Muslim unity, right? He was also successful in building moderates, extremist unity in the year 1920. So therefore, because of his inclusiveness, he also took up leadership of the workers. You can give example of Ahmedabad mill strike, right? And therefore he was a leader who was a leader of every social section. He focused on women empowerment also. So not just method of non-violence, but he focused on women empowerment also. And he very regularly included all of these things as part of his constructive work, and therefore gradually different sections of the society, they gradually entered into the mass movement. Example, you can give example in Khilafat movement. Example, he supported Khilafat movement. Therefore, this resulted in participation of the Muslims in the Indian national movement, right? This kind of scenario. He supported Akalis who had started this Gurudwara reclamation movement, Akali movement 1920-25. He supported Akalis, and therefore he included the Sikh community, the Punjabi community also into the Indian national movement. So this is how you can give examples that how Mahatma Gandhi tried to bring the ideology aspect into the social base. Within the Gandhian ideology, second component which is related to the social base is Mahatma Gandhi, example, he made INC a mass organization. In 1920 Nagpur session, Char Ana Fi, use Hindi as far as possible. If we are talking about social base, it is valid that we talk about that Mahatma Gandhi always believed in the strength of the masses, and he converted INC into an organization of the masses. And since INC was the main actor of the Indian national movement, therefore it allowed for organized participation of masses and more participation of masses, right? So this component also needs to be mentioned. Why? Because if the organization which is leading the Indian national movement, if that does not cater to the nation, that is the masses, then how will masses participate, right? So this point also needs to be mentioned. Second component that you can mention is regarding the left, right? So here you can begin with an event of world history, that is the Russian Revolution 1917, right? So you can mention that the Russian Revolution 1917 inspired workers of the whole world, including in India, to become politically active, right? As the Russian Revolution 1917 resulted in establishment of USSR in 1920 as the first communist state. And we know that communist ideology is pro-working class ideology, right? Therefore, as a result, in 1922 Gaya session, C.R. Das successfully argued that Indian National Congress should change its stand, and now it should take up issues of all workers. That is not just workers of the foreign owned enterprises functioning in India, but also workers of the Indian owned enterprises functioning in India, right? Otherwise, they will start their own class struggles. So INC stand was always that they will not support the workers of the Indian owned enterprises. Why? Because then the issue will become Indian versus Indian issue. So that's why in the Swadeshi movement and otherwise also, moderates, they never supported Indian workers of the Indian factories, right? But now there is a change in stand, right? There is a change in INC stand, and what is that change? That all working class issues will be raised by the Indian National Congress. So obviously, if INC is going to take up issues of all workers, then the support base of the Indian National Congress will definitely be more, right? So that is what can be mentioned. Next part that you can say is that in 1920s, revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh were also inspired by the communist ideas, and they said, for example, Bhagat Singh argued that real independence will come not just by ending the British political rule, but real independence will come by ending all kind of class oppression. That is, all kind of oppression of the poor by the rich. So not just remove the Britishers, but also remove the oppression of the masses by the rich people, right? So therefore, in this particular sense, the leftist trend is taking its roots even among the revolutionaries. Plus, we can mention that in 1920s, leaders like Netaji Bose and Nehru, they also got impacted by ideas of socialism, and therefore there was rise of INC. There was rise of leftism or leftist ideology within the Indian National Congress in the form of Bose and Nehru. And then there was this Congress Socialist Party which was set up in 1934 within the Indian National Congress. Outside of the Congress, CPI was set up in the year 1920 in Tashkent, and then in the year 1925 in India. That means now those who believe in the leftist ideology, they are having their own special party called Communist Party of India, inspired by the establishment of the USSR. And you can mention this, therefore, this rise of the left. So what is the conclusion? Ultimately, we are focusing towards the social base, right? So therefore, ultimately, it will lead to what? It will lead to increased peasant participation and working class participation. Peasant participation and the working class participation in the Indian national movement. And as a tribute to the workers, you can say that peasants and workers, right, or the communists, they played important role. Communists played important role in integration of princely state also. अगर ऐसा एक sentence बोलना चाहते हो बोल सकते हो. And workers, they became permanent part of, peasants and workers, they became permanent part of the Indian national movement, right? So this is the leftist trend that you can mention. Third component, you can talk about the capitalist trend. So gradually, as there was growth of capitalist trend, so gradually as there was growth of modern machineries, etc. in the Indian economy, so Indian capitalists, they also tried to venture out into this thing by importing machines, etc. You can mention that in 1927, FICCI was set up, right? It is an organization of the Indian capitalists, right? These people, they supported, these people, they were not pro-British, and they supported Indian National Congress and they supported Indian national movement, but in a mild manner. So here you mention that they supported the Indian national movement and the Indian National Congress periodically, so that Britishers, they are able to, so that the Britishers, they bring certain kind of concessions for the Indian industry. However, they did not want very long periods of struggle, because that would result in destabilization of business, right? If workers are going on a strike for a long period of time, then how you are going to function? If people are boycotting the British goods for a long period of time, there are many importers who are importing the British goods, right? So their livelihood would be hurt, right? So they always supported the INC and the INM, but businessman always wants a stable law and order. Otherwise, the business will not function if protests are taking place on the streets continuously for a long period of time, right? So they supported INC, they supported INM. They were not pro-British, but their support was always a mild kind of a support, right? But they did not negotiate behind the back of Indian National Congress. So that is the capitalist strand which is there. Then you can individually mention about revolutionary ideology, right? So in the revolutionary ideology, the sentence can be that revolutionaries first became active during the or after the Bengal partition in 1908 onwards, right? But were repressed, full stop. Then you can mention that again it was post NCM, it was post dissatisfaction with the withdrawal of the non-cooperation movement, right? That revolutionaries they again rose, right? Or you can mention that revolutionaries after repression participated enthusiastically in non-cooperation movement, but were greatly disappointed with its withdrawal in 1922, therefore re-initiated revolutionary activity. However, this time they were also inspired by socialist ideology. And there you can mention organizations, Hindustan Republican Army, 1924, HSRA, Hindustan Socialist Republican Army, 1928, then full stop. Then you can mention certain names like Chandrasekhar Azad, Bhagat Singh, or you can talk about Chittagong Armory Raid and Indian Republican Army of Surya Sen. From 1930 to 1933, IRA was active in East Bengal, right? So this is a rise, and later you can, iska last line bol sakte ho. Later the trend was revived, in form of two things: underground activity during your Quit India movement, 1942. Second point, in a way, INA 1942, right? So it is INA 1942 in the sense that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, right? So it is not exactly civilians doing revolutionary activity, but it is connected with disaffection in the army. But you can say that this trend was represented further by INA 1942. In this sense, you can mention, right? This is also a trend that sepoys there, or here the Indian army it is reporting. So we can connect it with revolutionary, right? Use of army to overthrow the British, it is also kind of a revolution, right? Then you can talk about women, right? So here you mentioned that because of Mahatma Gandhi, the participation of the women it increased, and gradually leaders like Sarojini Naidu, organizations like All India Women's Conference, right? National Council of Women in India, these people, they talked about not just Indian national movement, but they also talked about what you call as the women rights. Example, Sarojini Naidu successfully ensured that in the Government of India Act 1919, right to vote it is given to women. In the end, you can mention that however, though women participated in non-cooperation and civil disobedience movement, leadership was largely of men in the Indian national movement, right? This is what can be said. Next ideological strand, you can mention the what you call as Dalits or backward class, right? So here you mention introduction can be, it was Bal Gangadhar Tilak who during the Home Rule League movement of 1916-18 raised voice against untouchability. But majorly it was Mahatma Gandhi who from the very beginning made untouchability a public issue for the Indian National Congress. So 1920 Nagpur session, right? 1920 Nagpur session, he made untouchability, anti-untouchability as a part of the INC program. You can mention that his constructive work, be it before NCM or be it before CDM, always focused upon lower caste, upper caste unity and removal of untouchability, right? During CDM, second phase, that is from 1932 till 1934, primary focus was against untouchability. This one sentence you can mention. So in the second phase, after the Pune Pact of 1932, Mahatma Gandhi campaigned all across India, set up Harijan Sevak Sangh, 1932. Harijan Sevak Fund, 1932 or 33. Harijan Magazine, 20,000 kilometer yatra, too fast to raise awareness against anti-civility. So space is going to be less, so that's why only this much is good enough, right? Plus you mentioned Dr. B.R. Ambedkar ji, right? There you mentioned that B.R. Ambedkar's primary focus was not on social reconciliation, but upon the political and economic rights of Dalits. And he demanded from the INC that what is the share of Dalits in Swaraj? What is the share of Dalits in Swaraj? Right? So therefore, this is how you can mention that Dalit movement, it is also rising. Right? Yes, sir. Ek ideology negative bhi we can mention. Right? Although conclusion should be negative, not be negative, तो उसे कहीं ऊपर आप you can add communalism. Right? So initiation can be that since formation of Muslim League in the year 1906, there was rise of communalism. However, during the Khilafat and non-cooperation movement, Mahatma Gandhi was able to unite the INC and the Muslim League, or were able to unite the Hindus and the Muslims into a joint movement, right? But thereafter, post withdrawal of non-cooperation movement, there were multiple communal rights from 1922 to 1924, and during preparation of the Nehru report 1928, differences with Muslim League resulted in rise of communal politics by the Muslim League. Full stop. ऐसा आप कर सकते हैं. ये भी बोल सकते हैं that there was also Shuddhi movement for reconversion to Hinduism, and in response Tanzim and Tabligh movements in the 1920s. ऐसा 2-3 सेंटेंस लिख के इसको. So these are the multiple ideological strands, but this is a negative, so therefore this is going to hurt the social base. You can also mention that Communist Party of India did not support the CDM, did not support the Quit India movement because of directions from USSR or because of proximity with USSR. Therefore, this also hurt the social base. So 2 examples of communists and communalism hurting the social base, rest of the examples of expanding the social base, right? This is how you can mention. बीच में आप चाहें तो 1-2 examples you can give of some movement also, right? मतलब obviously ये बहुत सारा content है, but just in case इसको shorten करके अगर आप लिख रहे हैं, so some hallmarks you can pick up. Huge participation of workers and peasants in the non-cooperation movement, right? That is huge participation of women in the civil disobedience movement. First time participation of capitalists in the civil disobedience movement. First time participation of the people of the princely states in the Quit India movement, right? So this is how gradually the social base it is expanding. ठीक है, तो it is upon you कि कितना उसके अंदर से आपको करना. ठीक. Next question is trace rise and growth of socio-religious reform movements. Rise and growth of socio-religious reform movements with special reference to the Brahmo Samaj and Young Bengal, right? So therefore focus is on this, trace rise and growth of the socio-religious reform movements with special reference to the Brahmo Samaj and Young Bengal. That means the question is directly telling you that more amount of space needs to be given to Brahmo Samaj and the Young Bengal, right? So in the introduction you can mention that it can be that it was the Western education that promoted doctrine of logic So actually what is happening is the Western education, it is promoting doctrine of logic. It is promoting doctrines of reason and rationality. And as a result, the Western educated middle class, it started questioning the present social ills. It started questioning the present social ills, right? So Western education, it is one of the reason for the social reform movements. Second aspect you can mention that it was cultural nationalism. Cultural nationalism. How cultural nationalism? So you will say that reforms or social reforms or social religious reforms, they were a response to the British criticism of the Indian civilization. So actually post 1813, the Britishers, they had started criticizing the Indian civilization, right? So ऐसा मतलब their confidence was rising because of industrial revolution and other things. So cultural nationalism, it increased, right? The social reforms, they were also a product of cultural nationalism, as they were a response to criticism by the Britishers. Their response to criticism by the Britishers of Indian civilization, especially after 1813 onwards, right? Especially after 1813 onwards, they had started criticizing actually after 1800. By the time period of 1813, 63 years of industrialization has taken place. Industrial revolution took place from 1750 to 1850. So 63 years of industrial revolution has taken place. So Britishers, they were feeling extra confident. By 1813, the Britishers, they have also defeated the Marathas in the Second Anglo-Maratha War, 1803-05. Already by 1799, they have taken care of Mysore. Already they had taken care of Awadh, etc. So their confidence was relatively high, right? So therefore, एक superiority complex हम कह सकते हैं that was coming into them, and therefore now Orientalism was over. Orientalism, it meant that Britishers believing that Indian civilization is great, and now there was a rise of other kind of ideologies. Overall, the British criticism of the Indian civilization has increased. So when the Britishers, they started criticizing, so in response we rose and we said, no, Indian civilization was great, and today also it is great, and we'll prove it to you by doing social reforms, right? So in this sense, we can mention that social reforms, they were a product of cultural nationalism, right? So because the question is asking us about rise and growth, कि क्यों rise हुआ, क्यों grow हुआ, so therefore we are mentioning Western education, cultural nationalism. And third, role of British was also there. That is, Britishers, they also tried to play a positive role in the rise and the growth of socio-religious reforms. Why? To fulfill white man's burden. To fulfill white man's burden. So Britishers, they had this belief that they have to civilize the rest of the world, and therefore they, by using their legislative authority and by using their executive authority, they, after 1813, they consciously tried for social reforms, right? Examples are abolition of sati in 1829, Hindu Widow Marriages Act 1856, right? Abolition of child infanticide, and all of these things, right? So therefore it is because of three reasons that there is a rise and growth of socio-religious reform movements, right? So next point we can mention, we can come to the spatial reference part, that is to Brahmo Samaj and the Young Bengal. So there we can mention that the lead role here, that the lead role was played by what you call as Brahmo Samaj. Lead role was played by Brahmo Samaj, right? Or you can say that there was lead role was played by Brahmo Samaj, ऐसे कर सकते हैं, and you can explain Brahmo Samaj, then you can go towards Young Bengal, ठीक है, ऐसे भी कर सकते हैं. Or you can mention that in this context there was rise of organizations like, or groups like Brahmo Samaj and Young Bengal. Brahmo Samaj and Young Bengal, right? So here you can elaborate upon Brahmo Samaj, right? That is the ideology of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, or what all activity was done by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, right? So here, ideology wise, you can mention that Brahmo Samaj or Raja Ram Mohan Roy, they focused on which kind of social ills? So it was basically idol worship, priestcraft, infanticide, casteism, polygamy, and polytheism. So therefore, social reformers, especially Brahmo Samaj and Young Bengal, they questioned these social ills. Second point you can mention, however, it was abolition of sati, which was the primary focus, and it was the primary focus. And Raja Ram Mohan Roy, he worked along with the British like William Bentinck, for abolition of sati, right? For abolition of sati, and ultimately he was able to prove that sati is murder as per every shastra. That is, you say that Raja Ram Mohan Roy believed in using, or he used the scriptures, to prove that sati is murder as per every shastra. He was opposed by Dharma Sabha. He was opposed by Dharma Sabha of Radhakanta Dev, but ultimately he was successful. In getting this done. Okay. Apart from this, you can mention that Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Brahmo Samaj, they promoted the idea of universalism and monotheism. And there you can mention that monotheism, it meant that monotheism and universal, they meant basically two things, that within Hinduism there is only one God, and Hindu God is equal to Muslim God is equal to Christian God, right? So inter-religion there is one God, and intra-religion also there is only one God. And later there was rise of Brahmoism also as an alternate religion. Especially under the leadership of Keshav Chandra Sen. Keshav Chandra Sen, he is becoming active after death of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. In 1860s, he is active, right? So Brahmoism was also promoted as a separate religion. You can mention that other prominent personalities like Debendranath Tagore, Akshay Kumar Dutt, they were also associated with Brahmoism. Even Swami Vivekananda at a particular point of time was also part of Brahmoism, right? Second component you can mention Young Bengal. So Young Bengal, it was led by Henry Vivian Desrosiers. So you can mention some things about him, that he was a Eurasian, that he was a professor in the Presidency College or in the Hindu College at that point of time, right? He was a professor in the Hindu College. He and his students, they are called Young Bengal. He radically promoted free thinking among his students, right? He promoted doctrine of logic, right? This, some work can be mentioned, that for example they set up a society for promotion of general knowledge. They focused on promotion of Western sciences, right? This is the work they are doing. In the conclusion part, you can compare the two. And here what you can mention, here the first point that can be mentioned is that Young Bengal, it used only logic for the purposes of reforms, and it even promoted atheism in a society which was deeply religious, and therefore the acceptability of the Young Bengal was very, very less. So they did become famous for their arguments, but otherwise their acceptability was very, very low, because the target population was deeply religious, and these people, they are only focusing upon logic, right? That is the aspect, right? Why should you not do child marriage? You should not do child marriage because it is not logical. But doing Garbhadhan ceremony, it is a religious belief of the Hindus. So you can take your logic and you can go to hell. We are going to follow our religion. That was the, obviously that is going to be a very natural reaction by the people. Second component is, you mentioned Raja Rammohn Roy. That on the other hand, Raja Rammohn Roy, Raja Rammohn Roy, he used scriptures. That is for his reforms. That is, he was also following the doctrine of logic, but he tried to find the logic, or he tried to locate the logic in the scriptures, right? And therefore he argued for the reforms by using the scriptures. That is, he would try to find out some shastra or some quoting in the shastras or in the other scriptures which basically support his reform position. So therefore, step number one, he decides that okay, this is what is an illogical social practice. Then he will search the scriptures, and then he will go to the religious masses or the religious Indians, and then he will argue that see, in our shastras, you are not a true Hindu if you are not following the true shastras, and the true shastras are in favor of the reforms, right? So therefore, this is how he used the scriptures, and as a result, he was more successful. Relatively, he was more successful, right? In the conclusion, last line you mentioned that however, even Raja Rammohn Roy and his Brahmo Samaj, their social base was limited. Their social base was limited to the upper caste Hindus. Their social base was limited to the upper caste Hindus, and since the leadership was also largely upper caste Hindus, and as a result, Brahmo Samaj could not develop a proper mass movement. Last line, also in 1860s, also in 1866 to be specific, there was split in Brahmo Samaj due to ideological differences between Debendranath Tagore and your Keshav Chandra Sen. Therefore, Brahmo Samaj and Young Bengal both could not establish a mass movement, right? So therefore, this kind of conclusion, it can be there, right? Next question that we have is this: to what extent did the role of the moderates prepare the base for wider freedom movement? Comment. So since the question is comment, so therefore we have to take a position, right? We don't have to only praise, we also have to mention their weaknesses, right? So what is going to be the structure of this? To what extent did the role of moderates prepare the base for wider freedom movement, right? So if you talk about their positive contribution, right? Their positive contribution is that first point, right? So overall, these are the positives. So you mentioned that they were the ones who began the project of the national unity. You can mention certain examples that in the first session of the Indian National Congress, Bombay session 1885 itself, they declared that the purpose of the Congress is to promote national unity. Second point, here you can mention that in this project, for example, they used to hold sessions in different parts of the country, and the leader from that particular region will not be the president of that particular session. This created a all India level leadership. How will it create all India level leadership? It will create all India level leadership. For example, if you are Bengali and a Marathi has come to Calcutta and he is the president of the Indian National Congress session, right? And then newspapers, they publish his speech and he's talking about issues not just of British India, but he's also taking up issues of Bengalis or Bengal. So therefore the Bengali leader would start developing affection, respect towards this Marathi leader also, right? So therefore a Bengali population will gradually start thinking of a Marathi person as a positive leader. Also this Marathi leader, when he becomes the president of the Calcutta session, he would also be understanding the issues of Bengalis in a much better manner. So therefore he is becoming a all India level leader, right? Because he knows that, okay, these are the different kind of issues. And the people, they are also viewing someone who is not from their region as their leader. So therefore people are accepting outside of the region leadership, and outside of the region leader, he is also accepting his support base much better, right? So that is the theme behind it. But sessions, they were held in different parts of the country, and a leader from that particular region will not be the leader or the president of that particular session, right? Second, they built culture of debate. INC sessions, they were held in a very democratic manner, as if INC session is a parliamentary session. So therefore they built a culture of parliamentary politics, and they also built a culture of debate. Parliamentary politics and culture of debate. Then if the tool of the initial Indian national movement was press, then they used the press very very to raise the Indian national movement demands. Here you can mention certain examples. For example, even before setting up of INC, there was this campaign for Indianization of civil services. There was in the press from 1877 to 1880. There was campaign against Vernacular Press Act. These people are also moderates, right? These people are also moderates, right? So they are the ones whose efforts, they resulted in this press campaign. Ultimately it resulted in Indian Councils Act of 1892, and their demands are expansion of the councils, introduction of indirect elections, at least bringing of limited self-government. This kind of scenario you can mention. Then you mention this, and this will take the most of the space, that their biggest contribution was drain theory. That is, biggest contribution was drain theory, whereby they developed the economic critique. Of the British Raj, right? So you can expand upon the drain theory there. You can mention that the core of the theory was that after the industrialization of the Britishers, they converted India into a source of raw material and into an export market, right? This was the modern colonial relationship which was set up by the Britishers. Then you can mention that drain was there. You can mention certain components of the drain. For example, drain was there in the form of military expenditure. Drain was there in the form of home charges. Home charges, which for example, they include salaries, they include pensions. You can mention that it was the Indian taxpayer money which was financing the trade of the Britishers, tax finance trade. You can mention that the exchange rate, it was adjusted between pound and rupee so as to benefit the British businesses. There was no import duty to protect. When there is an import duty, then the Indian businesses, they are protected from the competition of the imported goods. So there was no import duty to protect the Indian businesses until World War I, right? So therefore this is how you can mention that to begin with, the Western educated middle class was a brown sahib, but the same Western educated middle class in the form of the moderates, they gave drain theory, and therefore they developed the intellectual criticism of the Britishers, and they basically proved that white man's burden, the Britishers, they are not here to fulfill white man's burden, they are here for the for exploitation, economic exploitation of India. This is their positive, and in this sense they are preparing a future base, right, for the, and Plus you can mention that how it is future based. The same drain theory, when in future the extremists and Mahatma Gandhi, they focused on boycott and promotion of Swadeshi goods. Then they are basically implementation of this grievance of drain theory. It is participation of the common man with respect to reversing the drain. When in the Home Rule Leagues 1916-18, you can mention that it was the moderates who developed the criticism of the British rule. However, the moderates, they majorly used press, right? They majorly used press, and therefore their core support base was the Western educated middle class. You can mention that later during the Home Rule Leagues, during the Home Rule League movement, the Home Rule League movement was basically an education propaganda. So you can mention that during the Home Rule League movement, Tilak and N.E. Besant, they basically made the common man educated on, or made the common man aware about the base which was prepared by the moderates. You know, Home Rule League movement was basically an education propaganda on Swaraj. So you tell the common man that why there should be Swaraj, what are the benefits of Swaraj, how the Britishers they are exploiting us, right? So what I'm trying to say is that in some form we need to write down that if moderates they educated the educated sections of the society about nationalism or how the Britishers they are exploiting us, that very same content was simplified and in a way told to the common people who are not Western educated in the form of future Indian national movement like Home Rule League movement, or in the form of Swadeshi movement or non-cooperation movement or civil disobedience movement, where this focus on boycott, Swadeshi goods and the concept of Swaraj is always there, right? So that is the idea which is there. But since it is a comment, so what are the negatives, right? So the question was to what extent. So therefore we have to mention the extent. So therefore some of the negatives. So the same thing it is there. These people, they did not हाँ जी ठीक है, थोड़ा स्लो कर देंगे. पहले क्वेश्चन पर 1 घंटा भी लग गया ना. क्लास नहीं है ना ऐसा. Didn't take up issue of since the question is asking to what extent did the moderates prepare a base for wider freedom movement. So therefore we have to mention. So these are the positives, but we have to talk about the extent also. So in terms of the negatives, for example, they never believed in mass politics. So if you are not going to involve the masses, then your social base is going to be very narrow, right? You are writing newspapers, but whatever you are writing can be understood only by the educated section which is in minority. Example, around the time period of 1921, only 8% Indians were literate. And moderate phase it is ending around 1905. They also never believed in the mass politics. They also didn't take as their only method was of newspapers, right? They did not take up issues of the social sections. So Indian National Congress in 1886, it made a rule that INC will pick up only political questions, that INC will not pick up questions of upper caste, lower caste, Hindu, Muslim, women empowerment. These issues will not be picked up by the Indian National Congress. They can be picked up by social associations, social organizations, but they will not be picked up by the Indian National Congress. Such was the rule. Why? Because the Congress, they felt that it would result in Indian versus Indian disunity. So if we take up the issue of the workers, the capitalists, they will get angry with us. If they pick up the issues of the riots, the zamindars will get angry with us. This kind of concern was there. But if you are not going to pick up the economic and social grievances of the workers or the peasants who actually form the masses in India, so therefore your social support base is going to be relatively restricted. It will not be truly wide. Then leadership. So most of the Indian National Congress or most of the moderates, they were upper caste Hindus who belonged to middle class from Bengal, Bombay, Madras, and especially the presidency capitals of Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. So as a result, they were not truly representative. They cannot claim that we are true representative of India. One can claim that they are a true representative of India if you look at the Indian National Congress and if you are able to see a mini map of India, then one can say that Indian National Congress is truly representative of India. Right? So lower caste may not feel associated. People who are not from Bengal, Madras, Bombay, they may not feel associated with the Indian National Congress because they are not able to see their leaders present in the Indian National Congress. Although iska reason ye tha that uneven growth of Western education had resulted in uneven growth of the Indian national movement. That was the reason, but still. Also, these people, they were not full-time politicians. That is, they were teachers, they were lawyers, they were doctors, they were merchants, right? So therefore, they were not full-time politicians, right? Only in 1 year, they'll meet for 3 days in December, and they will say that this is an INC session. Extremists, they used to call it 3 din ka tamasha, right? 3-day drama, right? But these people, they used to say, right, so this, therefore they are not full-time, so their commitment is also half-hearted. So in this sense, because of lack of full-time commitment, because of lack of any, because they did not believe in mass politics, so they did not build any organization of the INC. Because of these factors, they moderates, their social base was always limited to, their social base was always limited to Western educated elite middle class, right? And they could never reach the common man, right? So therefore, there was a limit to their extent. If you want to, you can also mention that their method was also, not just their methods, but their goals was also moderate. Their goal was limited self-government. And maximum goal was self-government on lines of Australia and Canada. These people, they never even thought about Pune Swaraj, right? So in this sense, they did not have a wider appeal, right? So this is how you can answer this particular question. एक और पॉइंट मेंशन कर सकते हो, करना चाहो तो फील्ड. If any social leader, if any national leader, if he is successful in his goals, his popularity will increase. But if he is failing in his goals, his popularity will decrease. And as a result, one sentence that you can write down is that ICA 1892 failed to meet the goal of limited self-government. Indian Councils Act 1892 failed to meet the goal of limited self-government. Indian Councils Act 1909 did not meet the INC 1906 goal of Swaraj. It brought only limited self-government. Manaki, moderates, their goal was limited self-government from 1885. In 1892, it did not bring limited self-government. Then in 1906, moderates and extremists both decided that their goal is going to be self-government on lines of Australia and Canada. That is Swaraj. So next comes the 1909, right? And in the 1909, only limited self-government is brought, right? So, and leadership of INC was with the moderates only, ठीक है, सूरत स्प्लिट एटसेट्रा हो चुका है, एक्सट्रीमिस्ट को निकाल दिया है, ठीक है. सो बेसिकली व्हाट वी कैन से इज दैट मॉडरेट्स दे फेल्ड ट्वाइस टू मीट द ऑब्जेक्टिव्स ऑफ द INM. So simply you can say that their efforts resulted in IC 1892, which did not bring limited cells of government, so therefore they were a failure, right? So in that sense you can conclude this particular question. The next is bring out constructive work programs of Mahatma Gandhi during non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement, right? So what can be the introduction? Introduction, you can mention that the constructive work program of Mahatma Gandhi was inspired from his experience in South Africa, and it was also inspired from the constructive work which was done during the Swadeshi movement, right? This kind of scenario, right? अब इसमें दो पार्ट्स हैं इस क्वेश्चन में. एक तो ये है कि यू कैन सिंपली राइट डाउन द कंस्ट्रक्टिव वर्क प्रोग्राम ऑफ महात्मा गांधी ड्यूरिंग द नॉन कोऑपरेशन एंड द CTM, राइट, ऐसा. एंड सेकेंड कॉम्पोनेंट इज वी कैन मेंशन दैट व्हाई कंस्ट्रक्टिव वर्क, or what is the positive impact of the constructive work, why Mahatma Gandhi focused on constructive work. So two aspects can be there. First is why constructive work, and second is that during the non-cooperation movement, what was the constructive work resolution, and during the civil disobedience movement, what was the constructive work resolution, right? So if we begin with the non-cooperation movement, so therefore in the non-cooperation movement, there was this resolution which was passed in the special Calcutta session of 1920. Special Calcutta session of 1920. So there a constructive work resolution was passed. So what was the focus? Focus was, point number one, for example, focus on use of panchayats, right? Promote, the use panchayats, boycott the British courts. Second component was that promote khadi and boycott the British goods, British cloth. Third component was focus on Hindu-Muslim unity. Next component was anti-untouchability campaign. Anti-untouchability campaign, right? So therefore broadly these are the aspects, and obviously focus on anti-liquor campaign. Anti-liquor campaign, right? So this was the program of non-cooperation movement में 1920, that this constructive work, but this was the special Calcutta session whereby this particular program, it includes these elements of the constructive work. Then when civil disobedience movement was to be launched, so as we all know, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru, they wanted to launch civil disobedience movement relatively अर्लियर, मतलब पूर्ण स्वराज का गोल पहले अडॉप्ट हो जाना चाहिए, सिविल डिसोबीडियंस मूवमेंट लॉन्च हो जाती है इस तरीके से. सो और गोल शुड बी पूर्ण स्वराज. सो महात्मा गांधी अल्टीमेटली कॉम्प्रोमाइज वाज, Nehru report came in August 1928 and we demanded dominion status from the Britishers, right? Younger leaders like Netaji Bose and Nehru, they were demanding Poon Swaraj. So compromise was made, and compromise was that Britishers, if you do not give us Swaraj if you do not give us dominion status in 1 year, that is by 1929, then goal of the Indian National Congress will be Poon Swaraj, and Indian National Congress will be launching a civil disobedience movement for it, right? Aisa. So Mahatma Gandhi knew somewhere that he might be forced to launch a civil disobedience movement, right? So therefore he wanted to prepare masses in non-violent satyagrah. He wanted to prepare masses in non-violent satyagrah, and so therefore in 1928, again in the Calcutta session, 1928 again in the Calcutta session, a constructive work resolution was passed. And what is the focus? Focus is that INC party karyakartas, they will go on the ground and they are going to promote what? They are going to promote women empowerment, right? Second component, again there is focus on what you call as your khadi. Focus is on self-help. Self-help basically means community should come together, right? And the community should, enter into some kind of joint exercises. Okay. Plus there should be skill development, skilling, and focus on community unity. right? That was the focus. Apart from that, anti-liquor campaign, untouchability, that is there. Hindu-Muslim unity उसमें mention नहीं था, but apart from that, women empowerment and your anti-liquor campaign and untouchability, again they are the focus, right? So this is like you break it up, but a way to save spaces, you can mention them collectively also, because most of the things they are common, so therefore you can mention them collectively also, that in non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement focus was this, right? So ये तो factual data हो गया. Then component comes is that next aspect that you can mention is that what was the utility of constructive work. What was the utility of the constructive work? So basically, A, constructive work gave work to the party cadre. Gave work overall, matlab general work to the party cadre, right? When no movement is there. Second component you can mention that apart from those items, Mahatma Gandhi also promoted method of non-violent satyagraha. That is, training in satyagraha was done by Mahatma Gandhi in this constructive work so as to keep the movement non-violent. Third component, because constructive work, it focused on, let's say, Hindu-Muslim unity, upper caste, lower caste unity, focus on women empowerment. As a result, what happened is that today we are doing apolitical activity. Today we are doing skill development and NGO-like activity we are doing. Plus we are focusing on Hindu-Muslim unity, upper caste, lower caste and women empowerment. But tomorrow when the same leader will be giving a call for political activity, right? So therefore Hindus and Muslims, they'll be ready to come out on the streets for dharna. Upper caste and lower caste, they'll forget the barriers created by untouchability or anything else, and they'll be able to participate. They'll be willing to participate in the same movement, right? Those times will not be there that women, you stay back, we are going in Gandhian struggle, we'll come back. No, women will also now come out, right? And the men, they would have relatively lesser barriers. So basically, when you focus on when you build the community unity through constructive work, when you actually start, it will lead to greater participation in political movement. It will lead to greater participation. Such scenario would not be there. Let's say the lower castes are coming, right? And we are going to go to that particular choraha and we are going to do satyagraha. And someone has reached already. Who are they? They are the people from the upper caste. We are not going there, right? Or vice versa. This kind of situation will not be there because Mahatma Gandhi has focused upon the unity of the different sections of the society. So therefore, the work that you do in the constructive work will reap benefits for you in the political movement, right? So that is why Mahatma Gandhi focused upon constructive work. You can make INC famous among the people. Imagine you are doing constructive work activity, which is NGO-like activity. You try to do skill development. You try to, generate livelihood for the people also by organizing the people, by promoting khadi, ki tum khadi banao and we will purchase khadi, this kind of scenario. So you can also, so when you earn the goodwill of the people, then you can also make Indian National Congress famous among the people, right? And therefore you can increase the membership of the INC also with the help of constructive work, right? So therefore INC will become famous among the people that see these people are helping us through skill development, these people are helping us through by doing community help and all of that. So therefore INC will also become famous. So therefore this is the utility of the constructive work, and that's why Mahatma Gandhi focused upon the constructive work, right? Yes, so this is how we can mention. And अगर space इसमें content अगर आपको थोड़ा सा और add करना है, so there, as you discussed in the previous question, so there you can also mention with respect to, you can expand the CDM, and here you can say that here constructive work entered into a mission mode with respect to untouchability. The second phase of the civil disobedience movement was dominated by anti-untouchability campaign. dominated by anti-untouchability campaign by Mahatma Gandhi. So here you focus on Harijan Sevak Sangh, Harijan Sevak Fund, Harijan Magazine, 20,000 kilometers march, 2 fasts, right? So therefore, proper, with respect to the constructive work for the unity of upper caste and lower caste and removal of untouchability, the second phase of CDM played a very, very important role, right? So this is how you can fill further, right? So that is what you can mention. Next is why armies of the British East India Company comprising of Indian Sepoys win consistently against the more numerous and better equipped armies of then Indian rulers. Give reasons. So the question is straightforward. So you can mention that by 1800 introduction, it can be that by 1857 the Britishers, they were able to capture, East India Company was able to annex 63% of the territory of India that had 78% population of India, and the rest of the princely states, they were under domination, or they were under subordination. Subordination via subordinate alliance, etc. Right? So they were under subordination. So therefore, either indirectly or directly, the Britishers, they have been able to establish their rule over India. Right? So therefore that can be introduction. So, and then you can come to that how this was possible, or following became possible, right? The question basically hai that there were so many Indian rulers, and if you combine the armies of the Indian rulers, then the size of this army will be much, much bigger as compared to the size of the East India Company. And the army of the East India Company, it is also having Indian sepoys, right? So therefore, what is it that why they are able to be victorious, right? So answer, it can come in the form of, first component you can mention, royal military support. That is in the initial phase, that is in beginning. See, understand, company is a company is formed to do business in India. Company was not set up to do empire building in India, but still the very same company is able to build an empire. So in the beginning, when it is doing Battle of Plassey 1757, right? So it would require help, and it got help from the military of Britain, right? So actually, Third Carnatic War was going on 1756 to 63, right? And which was actually part of a global war between Britain and France, right? So the countries were fighting, Britain and France were fighting, and therefore the royal militaries, or the national militaries of both Britain and France, they came to India, right? Aisa. Now they came to India, wo sab Carnatic Wars is going on, then something happens, and Mr. Robert Clive receives a call from Mir Jafar, right? And Mir Jafar is like, dude, I need your help. Okay, what is the help? I'm ready to pay you a huge amount of bribe, right? And I want you to get rid of Sirajuddaulah. Right? So yes, Mir Jafar also played a role, that since he was the war commander, so significant portion of the army did not participate in the Battle of Plassey. But how did Robert Clive got the confidence that he can accept this proposal? What if on the battlefield the Bengal army fully participates and somehow Mir Jafar is not able to deliver? So it was the royal military which was present there to support the East India Company, which gave confidence to Robert Clive that he can march against the Bengal army, that he can do the Battle of Plassey 1757, right? So therefore, one of the reason because of which the East India Company was able to defeat the Indian army, example in the form of Battle of Plassey 1757, was the support of the royal military. So royal military aided East India Company. One example, it can be, for example, a very interesting scenario, that initiation of Conquer 1757. So when the conquest by EIC is beginning, EIC is able to begin conquest because of the help of the royal military in 1757. And you see, survival of, or simply you can mention that survival of EIC rule or simply British rule. This you can mention. Survival of British rule. Kaise? Even in the 1857 revolt, when we had nearly overthrown the British rule, it was the Royal Military which came from Britain, which was in September and October 1857, because of which the East India Company was able to defeat us. Otherwise, we would have been able to overthrow the British rule. So during the initiation of conquest was also with the help of the Royal Military, and survival of the conquest was also because of the help of the Royal Military. So this becomes one of the reasons because of which they were able to do this, right? Second component you can mention is about their political strategy. About their political strategy, right? So what is their political strategy? For example, their political strategy is of, divide and rule. Political strategy of divide and rule, or using factionalism and using factionalism, right? So how this divide and rule is taking place? For example, if you internal factionalism. No one has forced Raghunath Rao, 7374 means 1773 to 1774. It was he who was removed as a Peshwa by Nana Fadnis in Barbhai conspiracy, and after that he in 1775 went to the East India Company in Bombay that please help me to regain Peshwaship. In return, I'll give you some territory in the form of Salsatte and Basin or Salsatte and Vasai. Right? So therefore, East India Company in Bombay accepted the offer, and therefore first Anglo-Maratha war began. Right? That means, can we say yes, Britishers they lost the first Anglo-Maratha war, but they were able to ultimately, when they signed the Treaty of Salbai, they are able to have a military alliance with the strongest power in India. Right? They are able to. अगर रघुनाथ राव नहीं गए होते तो ट्रीटी ऑफ सालबाई नहीं हुई होती. Had Raghunath Rao not gone there, so therefore ultimately war would also not have taken place, and Treaty of Salbai would also not have taken place in 1782. Right? So therefore, example of Raghunath Rao seeking help of Raghunath Rao. Example of Raghunath Rao seeking help of EIC. So therefore this led to the first Anglo-Maratha War 1775-82, which resulted in Treaty of Salbai, right, which resulted in a military alliance. So this kind of scenario. Second example you can mention, how did they use the internal factionalism? They are using the internal factionalism. For example, they signed subordinate alliance in the year 1802 with Gaikwad of Baroda. Why? There was a succession dispute which was going on, and the person who was present as the ruler of Gaikwad, there was some succession dispute which was going on, and one of the party of the Gaikwads, right, they requested the British help. At this point of time, Wellesley is present, 1798 to 1805. So Wellesley says, I am ready to support you militarily so that you become the king or you become the next Sardar of the Gaikwads, but you have to sign subordinate alliance with me. Right? And as soon as you sign subordinate alliance, you know that the Indian state loses control over the military. Military is now going to be maintained by the East India Company. Right? So therefore, because we were divided internally, that is why a Maratha Sardar, Gaikwad, is willing to sign subordinate alliance with the Britishers. Right? So therefore, had we not been internally divided, this kind of scenario would not have taken place. Right? Internal factionism, these are the two examples which are present. Then second point you can mention is another aspect. For example, इसमें internal factionism में एक और बोल सकते हो. In fact, this is very important. For example, Swarajya or Maharashtra itself signed subordinate alliance in the year 1802. right? In the year 1802, Treaty of Bassein it is signed by Bajirao. Who signs? Bajirao the second, who was there from 1796 to 1818. He was the last Peshwa. In subordinate, he was removed by Holkar of Indore, right? He was removed by Holkar of Indore, and like father, he also went to, Raghunath Rao was his father. Like his father, he also went to the Britishers and he requested, please make me Peshwa. Wellesley said, in return, you have to sign subordinate alliance. He said, okay. So imagine Marathas, Swarajya, which is set up by Chhatrapati Shivaji, right? He became Chhatrapati in 1674. That is surrendering its army, its military to the Britishers, right? In 1802. That is why बहुत सारी किताबें ऐसी हैं, there are many books जो खत्म हो जाती हैं 1803 में, in 1803, because Delhi is captured by the Britishers in 1803. राइट, पुराने टाइम में कुछ ऐसी किताब लिखी जाती है 1803 में हो गया कैप्चर, ठीक है, इंडिया इज नेक्स्ट, दिस काइंड ऑफ सिनेरियो. सो दिस इज अनदर एग्जांपल. सेकंड केस यू सी, अनदर एग्जांपल इज इन द फॉर्म ऑफ इंटरनल, दे मेड यूज ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटीज ऑफ इंटरनल डिस्टर्बेंस. हाउ? Example, if you take a look at Travancore. So in 1805, Travancore, it signed subordinate alliance. Why? Actually, there was a revolt by Nair troops. And Travancore, it wanted help of the East India Company. It was an ally of the East India Company. Travancore को East India Company help करती थी with respect to animosity with Mysore and all. Right? Although Mysore 1799 में it has done and dusted, right? So there was a revolt by Nair troops. Why they had revolted? Because they had not got salaries, right? And therefore they revolted. Travancore, it requested help from the Britishers. Britishers again, they said, Wellesley was present. He said, if you sign subordinate alliance, then I'll be able to help you. So therefore Travancore, it will also lose its military to the Britishers, right? This kind of scenario. अच्छा, subordinate alliance में एक छोटा सा एक example मैं दे रहा हूँ. For example, this example I gave in the class also. मतलब in subordinate alliance, military is of the Indian state only, but it is maintained by the East India Company. Military is of the Indian state only, it is maintained by the East India Company. For example, it is something like if you order food from the restaurant, if you are hungry, right? You have to eat food. Similarly, any state has to maintain a military, has to have a military, right? It is a must. Two options are there. Either you can cook food in your own kitchen, that is the state can maintain its own military, or you can order from Zomato or Swiggy, right? And in return you would have to pay money. So therefore, like you can outsource the basic function of making food, similarly you can outsource the basic function of maintaining army, right? So here this is what happened. So therefore they paid subsidy, that is money, and in return East India Company maintained an army for these people, right? But obviously this army is belonging to the state, but it is maintained by the East India Company. So therefore tomorrow East India Company can ask the army to point the gun at the king also, at the ruler also, right? So anyways, so this is how through their internal disturbances. Next component that comes into operation is regional rivalry. For example, if you focus on, let's say, why, if you focus on Hyderabad versus Marathas versus Mysore rivalry, right? So therefore, during the 4 Anglo-Mysore wars, right? During the 4 Anglo-Mysore wars from 1766 till 1799, there was only this period, brief period, when in 1780 to 1784, this second Anglo-Mysore war is taking place. Second Anglo-Mysore war is taking place. And here from 1775 until your 1782, this first Anglo-Maratha war is taking place. There is only this common period. There is only this common period of 1780 to 1782, when Hyderabad, Marathas and Mysore, they come together and they fight against the Britishers. And the Britishers, they start losing, right? And therefore in 1782 they say, अरे रे Marathas, why are you angry? Please sign Treaty of Salwai. Please sign Treaty of Salwai. ठीक है. अरे Hyderabad, why are you angry? Please take Guntur back. I had forcefully taken over Guntur. Please take it back. My biggest threat right now is Mysore. Marathas, you'll also not be happy if Tipu Sultan is able to capture whole of South India. Hyderabad, see, they are trying to be very, very aggressive. So therefore you let us come together. Right? Now Tipu Sultan was very aggressive. His regional policies, they were totally negative in terms of annexations, in terms of, so he was not acting in a diplomatic manner at all. Right? So therefore, what is the point? That Hyderabad, Marathas, Mysore, they are the strong Indian powers in South India, they are not able to come together. Right? So therefore, this is how they are using. And there was an alliance. Most of the time during these wars, there was an alliance between Hyderabad, EIC and Marathas. Hyderabad, EIC and Marathas. In fact, there is another example. You know, Hyderabad was the first state to sign subordinate alliance in the year 1798. You know why it signed this subordinate alliance? Because it had huge fear of Marathas. And obviously of, other players like Mysore also. Right? So therefore it's like कि मुझे बस Marathas से बचा लो. I am ready to sign subordinate alliance. Right? So therefore Hyderabad जैसा important state. भाई what are the states? Either there are Marathas or there are successor states जो big states हैं. ठीक है ऐसा. ठीक है. तो this kind of situation it is there. Right? So ऐसा subordinate alliance it is signed with Rajputs also after the second Anglo-Maratha war. मतलब वहाँ पे आप और भी चीजें लिख सकते हो. ठीक है ऐसा लिखने को. ठीक है. So this is how, but broadly what is the theme? Either they are using the opportunities or they are creating the opportunities either of rivalries between the regional Indian states or the internal factionalism within a particular state. Right? Aisa. This is what they're happening. Right? Apart from this, another reason was that they also had huge amount of free money, additional money. They are not maintaining army with their own money. They are not maintaining army with their own money. So, first through the Plassey plunder when they loot Bengal from 1757 to 1765. And then when they got land revenue of richest province of Bengal in 1765 onwards. Right? So it is through this money that they are able to maintain an army. Plus obviously there is booming trade. Duty-free trading rights are there. Right? So therefore they are getting enough additional sources, right, in the form of land revenue of India, and obviously the trade profits they are also there. So therefore they are monetarily able to have a big army. Another component is what you call as their techniques or their technology. Although the question mentions that Indian armies they were better equipped, well, because French help was taken, so probably that can be one of the reason. But otherwise, if you can mention this particular point, for example, grape shot. Right? Grape shot is like you can think of like a shotgun. You fire and 10-12 bullets will come towards you. Right? So that's grape shot. Plus Brown Bess musket. This was a rifle. So when you study about 1857 revolt, all the books they mention New Enfield rifle. So natural question comes to the mind that which was the old rifle then. So old rifle was this Brown Bess musket, which was very, very effective. It was able to pierce the armor of the Indian armies. Right? So this Brown Bess musket, bulletproof jacket हमारी fail हो जाती थी. This kind of scenario. So this used to function very, very well. Right? So this is there. Apart from that, when you read some books, तो ठीक है उसमें bayonets on the rifles. Bayonets मतलब कि you would have seen in the movies there is a gun and in front of the gun there is a chaku, there is a like a knife, right? That is called bayonet, right? So therefore you can do a long range combat with the help of the guns, and then when you are close then you can use the same. So these bayonets, they used to wreak havoc, right? So therefore, this is the component of technology. Then organization-wise, strategy-wise, you can mention file firing. In file firing, what used to happen is that, let's say, so like जैसे NC का ट्रेनिंग हो रहा है, फाइल में खड़े हो जाओ, stand in a file. So we are standing in a file formation, right? मैं इधर, मेरा friend इधर, उधर इधर, ऐसा file formation. ठीक है, जैसे morning assembly में we used to stand up, file formation, and then load, target identified, fire. All of us are going to regularly fire at a particular point, right? Firing. So it is like a rain of bullets is taking place on the target. Rather than just one bullet coming, a rain of bullet is taking place. So this is a file firing. And there was obviously very strong training also, modern training, right? Very high discipline. So the courage of the Indian soldiers combined with the modern weapons and the very highly disciplined training by the Britishers. So therefore that resulted in this. Apart from this, issue of salary was also there, right? So if you would compare the salary, so regular salary and more salary was given as compared to the Indian rulers, right? And in India there was a culture of this mercenary armies, that is Kshatriya culture was there, that like if you are paying us, it is a profession, right? So what do I do for profession? Varna, they are basically professions. So Kshatriya Varna, what does it mean? That it is my profession to fight. So you pay me money, in return I'll be fighting, right? So better pay, regular pay, that attracted, you know, better sepoys or more sepoys in that sense to the Britishers, right? Then there were some tactical mistakes also. Tactical mistakes, that is mistakes on our side. Here you can give some example. For example, you can give the example of 1764 Battle of Buxar, right? So tactical mistake was, ideally we should have followed defensive tactic, but in the end Shuja Uddaulah lost patience and he said that I'm going to follow aggressive tactics. Aggressive tactics mane, they were in a fort, the Britishers, they were in a fort, right? Our plan was that we'll surround the fort from all the sides. Over a period of time, we are going to, you know, starve them, right? That was the right strategy. Last May, obviously, advantages on that side where you are when you are in the fort, right? Those who are on the fort, if they are defending, fort is a defensive structure. जो attack कर रहा है उसको ज़्यादा problem है, ठीक है? So Shuja Uddaulah, he lost patience, and in the end, he changed the whole strategy and started attacking. So therefore, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. So some tactical mistakes, they also result in this kind of scenario. This is also an example that you can give. Okay. So this is how you can answer this particular question. Next question is that why there was a sudden spurt in famines in colonial India since mid 18th century. That is, the question is basically asking, the question is asking that since mid 18th century, that is since mid 1700s, that is 1750s onwards, right? Why there is more famines? Why there is more famines? So the introduction can be basic definition of famine. What is a famine? Famine is a mix of geographical factor and as well as a human factor, right? For example, today the government of India maintains huge amount of food stock. Why? So that famine is not there. Famine is basically a geographical condition, let's say a drought, right? Or there can be floods also. Plus, there is a human factor. Human factor. And what is the human factor? Human factor is, see, when there will be drought or flood, there will be shortage of food. When there will be shortage of food, there will be inflation, right? And if masses are in poverty, then masses, they will not be able to buy the food grains. If masses have huge amount of money, no problem. People from rest of the country, they will be loving to make profits and they will be sending their, you know, rice and wheat to Bengal or to any part to make huge profits. ठीक है, तो पैसा है तो सब चीज हो जाएगा. So two factors are there. A, there is poverty, and second, there is inaction by the government. That is government inaction. For example, today when we maintain huge stock buffer, right? So therefore the famine will not be there. Even if there is a drought, there will not be famine. So famine is basically bad harvest plus lack of state support and poverty. These are the factors which result in shortage of food grain. Okay, ऐसा. Second line that you can mention is, which is also very good introduction, you can mention that British rule began with the famine of 1770, where 1 crore Indians died, right? And British rule ended with 1943 Bengal famine, where roughly 50 lakh Indians died, right? So therefore this is a good introduction where you say that the beginning of the British rule and the end of the British rule, it was having this hallmark of famines, right? So what are the reasons because of which this is happening? So we have to focus upon इसका तो हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते, climatic factors का तो we cannot do anything. We have to focus on those factors which resulted in more poverty and which resulted in inaction by the government, right? So if we focus on inaction by the government, so for example in 1860s, right, inaction by the government तो पहले 1770 से start कर लेते हैं. So when there is Plassey plunder, Plassey plunder is there from 1757 to 1765. So Plassey plunder is so much amount of money is looted. So much amount of money it is looted by the Britishers in Bengal, right? That the people they come under huge amount of poverty, right? See, in the Plassey plunder what will happen? The Britishers they would ask Mir Jafar and other Nawabs to pay up. From where the Nawab will get money? It is taxpayer money. So therefore taxes would have to be increased, right? When taxes are increased, so people's pockets are empty. They are in poverty. So by chance if a drought will take place, then the people will die. They'll not have money to sow seeds and they'll not have money to buy the products also, right? So therefore Plassey plunder, it resulted in huge amount of poverty. And when there was a drought for continuous 2 years, so therefore 1770 Great Bengal famine took place where 1 crore Indians died, right? And plus when this Great Bengal famine 1770 is taking place, then East India Company did not do anything to help the people, and as a result the 1 crore people are dying. Okay, so huge amount of casualties are there. That is one of the aspect. Second component is there. Acha, from 1765 to 1770, the land revenue was also very, very high. Okay, so that is one aspect of the government. Second component that you can mention is that, for example, if we come to mid 1800s, right? So if we see that in 1860s and in 1870s, there were famines in different parts. So the government can spend extra money to, there were droughts in different parts, so the government, it can spend extra money to help. But what is the priority of the government? So, but if you look at the government behavior, for example, in 1860, the government introduced income tax, then it had to withdraw, but then in 1868, it still brought income tax, right? Second is, for example, if you focus on Lytton was there from 1876 to 1880, right? So when these famines are taking place, what is Lytton doing? Lytton is in 1877, Lytton is doing Imperial Darbar or Delhi Darbar, right? Which is a huge ceremony for coronation of Queen Victoria. And huge amount of money is being spent. That money could have been used to import food grains and help those regions which are affected regions. But the government is having the priority to spend the money on Delhi Darbar. That is pomp and show. Then from 1878 to 1880, Lytton's Afghan adventure. That is, he is fighting a war in Afghanistan. What is an adventure? Adventure is some action which is avoidable action. Adventure is something which can be avoided, right? Adventure ka definition ही है when you're taking some extra risk which is avoidable, right? So when you say Lytton's Afghan adventure, it basically meant that the fear of Russia attacking India via Afghanistan was not so real that you go ahead and you fight a war to ensure that your puppet is ruling Afghanistan. You could have used the same amount of money to help the poor people who are struck by famine, right? So this tells us that how the government it is behaving, this kind of scenario. Then third component you mentioned, that government after 1857 revolt, it always maintained a very, very large army. That amount of large army was not required. Why it maintained? Because it had a fear of Indians rising again. So they maintained a very large standing army, right? Obviously, and this used to consume roughly 40% of our budget. So if Indian taxpayer is paying 100 rupees, out of that 40 rupees you are spending on this large standing army. Standing army is the army which is there during the peacetime when no war is being fought, right? That amount of money could have been used for irrigation. That amount of money could have been used for when famines are taking place, so therefore to give something, right? This is the attitude of the government. Then you look at the attitude of the government with respect to irrigation. Irrigation means canals, that is providing water to the fields, right? Look at the behavior of what is so special about Bengal in that sense? This thing should strike the mind that Bengal famines are taking place. So irrigation. So basically the Britishers, they said that we will not build. No canals means focus was not there, right? In permanent settlement areas. In permanent settlement areas, no canals were set up, right? So, why? Because the government cannot increase the land revenue in these areas. So therefore they are also not focusing on building canals here. That is, if we are not going to benefit, then we are not going to focus on these particular aspects, right? Yes, sir. Third point you can mention that overall all the LR systems of the government, they were very oppressive. That is, be it permanent settlement, be it revenue farming system, be it Mehelwari settlement, be it Ryotwari settlement, all of them, they basically made people poor. They made the masses poor. The land revenue was very, very high. When land revenue is very, very high, do you think the peasant will have any additional amount of money available to invest in productivity of the land? Answer is no. He will not be having any additional amount of money to invest in the productivity of the land, because वो 100 रुपया बनाता है, उसमें से 50 रुपया, 40 रुपया, 60 रुपया तो सरकार ले जाती है. Government takes away. The tax is very, very high. So he's just simply feeding his family. He is not, investing in the land, right? Productivity of the land. So that is another aspect, right? Right. So this is what is there. Apart from that, you can also mention that the Britishers, they had no focus on the industrialization of India. There is no focus on industrialization of India, whereas the British goods, they are destroying the Indian handicraft sector. Right? As a result, all of those people who were earlier artisans, right, they will go where? They will go to the agriculture sector. Agriculture sector will get overburdened. It cannot support that many peasants. So basically, the Britishers, they are not focusing on improving the economy of India. They are not doing the industrialization of India. And at the same time, the British goods which are coming from Britain, they are killing the Indian handicraft sector, because now everyone is buying the British machine-made goods. No one is buying the Indian goods. So therefore, all of these artisans, they are basically now under poverty. They are now in the grip of poverty, right? So therefore, plus economy of India, it is not rising, right? So it is because of these factors, because of these factors that they are not doing anything, and as a result, all of these things are taking place, right? So, as a next question is, in 2021, there was this question, that is, assess the main administrative issues. assess the main administrative issues and socio-cultural problems in integration of princely states or in the integration process of the princely states, right? So what are the administrative issues that we can think? One of the administration, legal, one of the administrative issue is that if you notice the behavior of the Britishers, so be it the Butler Committee report of 1927, the report came in 1929, Butler Committee was set up in 1927. In that committee report, the Britishers, they re-emphasized the relationship of paramountcy. Basically, they are saying that British Crown is the paramount power over the Indian states, and the British Crown is going to protect the Indian states. And in future, we are not going to force the Indian states to become part of India. हम आपकी रक्षा करेंगे, हम आपकी सुरक्षा करेंगे, we will protect you, right? Then in Government of India Act 1935, if you would have noticed while studying, the central level provisions, they never come into effect. Why they do not come into effect? They do not come into effect because at least 50% of the princely states, they must sign the instrument of accession. That is, they must become part of India, right? British India. Only then the Government of India Act's central level provisions they will kick in, right? So instrument of accession, it was mentioned. So Britishers, they had this attitude towards the princely states, right? Protective attitude or not forcing them kind of attitude, because princely states, they had always stayed pro-British. They had supported the Britishers. Most of them had supported the Britishers in the World War I, World War II, right? So as a result, one of the administrative issue was that if we look at the Mountbatten Plan of 3rd June 1947, which was implemented by the Indian Independence Act of 1947. So it creates an administrative issue which basically says that paramountcy will end on 15th of August 1947. That means I am the Indian state, Britishers, this is the paramountcy relationship. So paramountcy will end on 15th of August 1947. माने कि the princely state is independent. And then they say paramountcy will not be transferred to any future government of India. That means princely state is independent. So legally, as per the Indian Independence Act of 1947 and as per the Mountbatten Plan of 1947, the princely states, they had legally the choice to stay independent. So therefore, the 565 princely states, which ultimately joined India, right? These 565 princely states, they can be independent. They can be independent. And therefore, this is a technical issue. This is the administrative issue, that how to convince the princely states to sign the instrument of accession with India, right? And therefore, this was a challenge, which was a major challenge in front of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and VP Menon, right, who were basically handling the States Department, right? And these people, they had to resolve this challenge, convincing the princely states that you please join India, you please join India. So Sam, Dand, Bhed, everything was followed, right? And therefore, but this was a administrative issue which was present with respect to the integration of the princely states, right? So here you can also talk about, so it's States Department. So basically these people, they convinced the princely states to sign instrument of accession. Now, second issue was MA. MA means merger agreement. When you sign the instrument of accession, it is like ठंडा दूध लो, उसके अंदर चीनी डालो, घुमाओ, पियोगे तो पूरा स्वाद नहीं आएगा, नीचे crystals अभी भी हैं. Repeating the same thing in English. If you take a cold milk, glass of cold milk, and you add sugar crystals to it, you stir it, you're drinking it, but at the end the crystals are there. That means identity of the sugar which is added to the milk is still existing, and you can ऐसा करके you can have the sugar, है ना? ऐसा. Instrument of accession is that scenario. When you sign the instrument of accession, तो पूरा merger नहीं हो रहा है. When you are signing instrument of accession, you become part of Union of India, but only sovereignty, yes, but otherwise the Union Government of India can give you directions only in 3 subjects: defense, communication and foreign affairs, right? Whereas in rest of the subjects, you can be independent, right? That is, you can do whatever you want to do. It is like some kind of Article 370, right? But proper merger is removal of Article 370, right? That is, you become just like any other province. So that is another challenge. That is to convince the princely states for signing of merger agreement. Because when you sign the merger agreement, then you are merging with India. That means you are acceding to India in all subjects. You are just like any other province, right? So therefore, this is another technical issue which is present, right? Example: Jammu and Kashmir, it only signed instrument of accession. It did not sign the merger agreement. It only signed the instrument of accession. Therefore, Article 370 was there, right? So, how to fully, bring these princely states into the ambit of India, right? This kind of scenario, right? Apart from this, if you focus on administrative issues, so you can talk about border states. So, isko socio-cultural to we cannot say, but border states. So, for example, Pakistan was giving a blank check of autonomy to the border princely states. Ki bas, you sign the instrument of accession with Pakistan, and after that you will have whatever you want, but just become part of Pakistan. So, therefore, this also created an issue, right? So, border states here, Pakistan, it gave blank check of autonomy. So overall, the administrative issues are there, that if you focus the administrative issue, it is actually created by the Britishers. The Britishers, they are leaving such an administrative setup, they are leaving such a legal setup that technically it is possible for each of the princely state to be independent, right? Second component is they are only talking about the instrument of accession, right, which results in accession in 3 subjects. So therefore, what about proper integration? That is proper integration. Proper integration is you put the milk on the heater or on the gas. So now when you have, so sugar अच्छे से मिल चुका है. Proper integration means proper merger. So therefore, how to convince them? So these are the administrative issue. Next administrative issue you can mention that border states. So Pakistan gave blank check of autonomy. So therefore, this is the scenario which is present, right? Aisa. Right. In fact, here you can mention that with respect to Jammu and Kashmir, you can mention certain examples, right? You can mention certain examples that, so 2 kind of princely states were there, Bhotmajo and HJJ. That is, some of the princely states, they decided that we are going to exercise the above power. And we are not going to sign the merger agreement. बहुत मज़ो सोचा इंडिपेंडेंस हो जाएंगे, बहुत मजे लेंगे लाइफ में, बहुत मज़ो. भोपाल, ट्रैवनकोर, मणिपुर, जोधपुर, हैदराबाद, जूनागढ़, JNK. These people, they signed late, but they signed before 15th of August. These people, they signed, but they signed after 15th of August. So you can briefly mention that, you can further add that in the case of Hyderabad, in the case of Junagadh, right, there was people's movement to bring these people or to force to force the rulers to sign the instrument of accession, something like this you can mention. ठीक है ऐसा, but ठीक है, यहाँ पे administrative issues, space is relatively less. We have to talk about this thing. Okay. So they did not sign immediately, they signed later. If you talk about the socio-cultural issues, right? So in the domain of socio-cultural issues, when you are reading, let's say, post-independence India, multiple times it is written that, for example, let's say the ruler is Muslim, right? And Pakistan is created on the basis of religion. So the ruler will feel that his rule may be more, protected in an Islamic country. Right, this kind of situation, or that since the communal tensions are high, otherwise also he might feel closer to Muslim League's leadership. But what is the social issue? Social issue is that masses in many of the cases, they were Hindus. And Hindus, they wanted to be part of secular India, wanted to join secular India. Be it Hindu or be it Sikh or be it any non-Muslim, if Pakistan itself is saying that we are coming into existence because we are focusing on the interest of a particular community only, then those people who do not belong to that community, they'll feel unsafe, right? If Pakistan is going to say that they are not going to be a secular country, so any person who is not a Muslim, he will feel unsafe in Pakistan. Whereas India is saying that India is going to be a secular country, right? So therefore all religions, they can feel safe, right? So in this particular scenario, ruler is Muslim, masses, in many of the cases, masses were Hindus who wanted to join secular India, right? So therefore this is an issue where the administrative power to join is with this ruler, and but the social power or the society, it wants to join India. So therefore this created troubles in many cases. For example, in the case of Junagadh, example in the case of Hyderabad, right? These issues, they are coming. In the case of Bhopal, this is the issue which is coming, right? So that is a socio-cultural issue. Second issue that you can talk about is, for example, let's say you can talk about issues of so integration of princely states is there, but okay, तो उसको देखेंगे. Another issue that comes into operation is, at times this is not a socio-cultural issue, but इसको भी यहाँ पे mention कर सकते हैं एक status. For example, in the case of Manipur. Now, in the case of Manipur, instrument of accession was signed, but after signing of instrument of accession, a popular legislative assembly was established. That means democratic system was established in the subjects other than the 3 subjects. So ideally, once a popular legislative assembly it is established, so after that all decisions should be taken by the legislative assembly. Decisions should not be taken by the king. But after this, the king, it signed merger agreement without taking the consent of legislative assembly. So this later resulted in some kind of separatist elements getting active in Manipur, right? So this kind of a situation it is also rising with respect to Manipur, right? Next social issue, society में क्या होता है? एक तो religion आता है, one aspect it is religion, right? Second aspect that comes into operation, it is language, right? Third aspect that comes into operation is, let's say, ethnicity, ठीक है? Language, ethnicity. Fourth aspect it comes into operation, for example, let's say education, right? So for example, with respect to language, if you see that there were 565 princely states, right? So therefore the challenge of integration of princely states cannot be dissociated from the challenge of reorganization of the princely states, right? From the challenge of reorganization of the princely states, right? So therefore reorganization, linguistic reorganization, you know, it was there will be a challenge of reorganization of the provinces, reorganization of the provinces or reorganization of the states. It was done on the basis of language. It was done on the basis of language. In 1956 State Reorganization Act, right? But since these princely states, they were numerous in number, and the populations, they were not organized linguistically in them. That is, many of these states, they were multilingual also. So therefore, the state reorganization, it was a very huge complex task because of this particular social factor, right? This particular social factor. Then another aspect that comes into operation is, for example, ethnicity, right? Ethnicity. So this issue which is coming in the case of Manipur, right? So Manipur had a tribal population with very distinct kind of customs and practices, right? So therefore, example of Manipur can be used, right? Although Nagaland is not a princely state, but fine, just as a separate example, you can also mention that, for example, in the case of Nagaland, The movement on the basis of ethnicity, the movement for a separate Nagalim had also begun in 1946 itself. Right? This kind of aspect can be mentioned, one or two aspects, that ethnicity based differences, they were also present, which contribute, basically ethnicity, it either resulted in demand for more autonomy or it resulted in movement for at times secessions also. Then with respect to education, so as we know that Western education, it basically resulted in modern nationalism. But in many of the princely states, the education levels, they were low. And when the education levels are low, then people, they tend to get more impacted. People, they tend to get more impacted by factors like, language, ethnicity, religion. Basically what we are trying to say is that since the Western education was low, so therefore in some scenarios, in some cases, the modern nationalism and therefore the desire for unity, it is also relatively low. In some of these scenarios it can be mentioned, right? Right, so this kind of scenario it is present. तो ये सब चीज़ें हम बोल सकते हैं regarding integration of the princely states में जो challenges, social and cultural challenges, right? In the conclusion, what you can write down? In the conclusion, you can mention that how these challenges they were resolved. So you have talked about Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and VP Menon. Apart from this, you can talk about the features of the Constitution of India. That how the Constitution of India, it has 5th schedule, it has 6th schedule, which tries to cater to the desires for autonomy. How reorganization of the states was done by the State Reorganization Act, right? How Article 370 and other things they provided for autonomy within India, and this is how the question it can be concluded. Next question that we have is, this question it is coming from world history. There arose a serious challenge to democratic state systems between the two world wars. Evaluate the statement. So basically, challenge to democracy or democratic state system. Democratic state system. कब? In the interwar years. Interwar years कब से कब थे? From 1919 to 1939. So this is the time period between the two world wars. This is the time period between the two world wars. World War I, 1914 से 19, World War II from 1939 to 1945. So what is the challenges? So the challenges of basically two kinds. One challenge on the left side, it is called communism. And another challenge on the right side, it is called fascism. So these two challenges are coming up, right? Issue is that base wise agar dekha jaye, so communism, it is an extreme left wing ideology. It focuses on one party system. Actually both of them, these are like common things. You can mention it like this. You can mention that there are some things which are common to them. For example, one party system. One party system is common to both communism and fascism, right? Apart from this, so therefore they do not believe in multi-party system. Then freedom of press. So freedom of press, it was usually covered by these regimes, right? Freedom of opinion, right? Apart from this, education, it was brought under the control, right? For, in a way, indoctrination. Indoctrination means mind washing. Indoctrination, right? Media, it was controlled. That is, state used to control the media, right? So no responsibility to the parliament. No responsibility to the parliament. That is, such a situation came to exist, be it communism, be it fascism, the consent of parliament as such, it is not mandatory. So therefore, in this particular sense, if either it is communism or it is fascism, right, the democracy or democratic state system, it is going to come under threat. Fundamental rights, etc., etc., all of that you can mention, that was not there. Second aspect is you'd have to give certain proofs, that what is the proof that how this thing is taking place. So if you talk about communism, then it all begins in 1920 with formation of USSR after the Russian Revolution of 1917, right? After the Russian Revolution of 1917, formation of USSR. So therefore so the working class is very excited that for the first time in the world, a communist state has come into existence and a communist revolution has been possible. So therefore this results in birth of communist parties all across the world. In fact, even in colonies also. Example, Communist Party of India, it was formed in 1920 in Tashkent. Communist Party of China was formed in the year 1921. Communist Party of Italy was formed in the year 1921. Right? So basically communist parties, they are coming up in different parts of the world. One example of a colony, one example of exploited but not a colony, one example of a European power, right? So therefore these communist parties, they are coming in different parts of the world. Communists, they were also active in Communist Party was also set up in your Germany also. Right, in Germany also. So you don't have to write the years, right? अभी तो मुझे याद नहीं आ रहा Germany का, I think इसका भी 1920 या 1921 था, अभी याद नहीं रहा. But fine, you don't have to write years, but communist parties, they are getting established in different parts of the world, right? And the working class movement, it is rising, right? So there is growth of communism, right? There is growth of communism. Second thing that happens is, so there is growth of communism, and in many of the cases, the communists, they try to take over power, right? For example, there was fear of communist revolution. There was fear of communist revolution in all of these countries, right? Right? There was fear of communist. For example, the Britishers, they are bringing, your public safety bill, right? In 1928, right? Baumann-Ciel in 1929. So 1928-29, they brought Public Safety Bill, Trade Disputes Act. So in case of India also, the Britishers, there is a merit conspiracy case. So the Britishers, they are having a fear of communist revolution. You don't have to write all of this. I'm just trying to give example. Mussolini was able to rise because there was a fear of communist revolution. But the communist revolution, and there was, so in the exam you simply write down that there was fear of communist revolution, and masses were actually attracted. Masses were actually attracted. Why? Because of poverty and misery of war. Right? So World War was very expensive, and usse pehle bhi poverty, etc. This kind of scenario. So in many of the cases, masses, because they are struck by poverty, workers whose wages, etc., they are down after the war. So therefore, wages were down after the war. Unemployment was high after the war. So as a result, many of the people, they got attracted to communism because communist ideology talks about pro-poor ideology. It is a pro-poor ideology. So there is rise of. Then another big event happens in 1929. There is Great Depression. When 1929 Great Depression happens, so Great Depression, it began in United States of America, right? As a result, capitalism came under big disrepute ideologically. That is, those people who are intelligent people, educated people, they are wondering that what kind of a system is it, that the whole world is collapsing. Was Karl Marx right when he said that in capitalism there will be recurrent cycles of booms and bust, this kind of scenario? So Great Depression, it resulted in popularity. It resulted in popularity of Marxism, or at least socialism. Marxism and socialism among the intellectuals as well as among the people, among the intellectuals as well as among the masses. Why? Because when Great Depression is taking place, so masses to tabah ho ja rahe hain, right? People, they are getting destroyed, right? So therefore they are getting disenchanted with capitalism, and therefore after 1929 there is even more growth of popularity of communism. Even more growth of popularity of communism, right? For example, even in Indian national, you can give example, right? So communism to nahi, matlab, right? So CPI is very active, right? CPI in India, it is very active. Even in Indian National Congress, not communism, but socialist leaders, Congress Socialist Party, it is being set up in 1934. So even in India, the communist as well as the left wing within the Indian National Congress, it is becoming more strong, right? Rise of the left, represented by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Jawaharlal Nehru, etc., etc., right? So therefore, this created a threat of to democratic state systems, right? This created threat to democratic state system. This is a kind of scenario which is taking place, right? However, right? तो ऐसा, तो इस तरीके से हम इसको कह सकते हैं. Second component, if you talk about, let's say, fascism. So in the case of fascism, how this thing is taking place? So actually what is happening is that two components are there. First of all, when the Treaty of Versailles are coming, these Treaty of Versailles, they are very, very harsh, right? They are very, very harsh on Germany, right? They are very, very harsh on Germany. Plus, Italy did not benefit. Italy did not benefit, right? ऐसा. So as a result, basically what is happening is, okay? So plus there is what you call as poverty and unemployment and poor economy post-war. Why? Because very high war expenditure was there, right? Because very high war expenditure it is there. Very high war expenditure it is there, right? So therefore, as a result, because there is very high amount of poverty and, right, और यहाँ पे Treaty of Versailles etc., it is also very, very harsh. As a result, plus we know that there was this rise of what you call as, plus there was rise of this, ठीक है, मतलब एक सेकेंड, इसको कैटेगराइज मैं करना चाह रहा हूँ. तो पहले या तो इटली के, चलो ठीक है, एनीवेज उस वाले राइट वाले पार्ट को दोबारा करते हैं. एक एलिमेंट जो मैं बताना चाह रहा हूँ, दैट वन एलिमेंट इट इज कमिंग, इट इज ऑफ नेशनलिज्म, राइट. सेकेंड एलिमेंट दैट इज कमिंग, इट इज ऑफ fear of communism. Fear of communism, right? So these are the two factors because of which fascism it is rising. Communism is extreme left wing, fascism is extreme right wing, right? Communism says we will end capitalism, this kind of scenario, right? And nationalism, so basically an extreme nationalism is a feature of fascism. So why nationalism it is rising? So nationalism rose very strongly. Why? Because humiliating Treaty of Versailles. Humiliating Treaty of Versailles, right? It resulted in rise in popularity. It resulted in rise in popularity of Hitler in Germany. Of Hitler in Germany, right? That is one aspect, right? In Hitler in Germany. Second component that is taking place is plus the democracy or the democratic governments, they failed. Democratic governments failed to resolve. They failed to resolve issues of economy post Great Depression 1929. So once Great Depression 1929 took place, a democratic government was in power in Germany, but this democratic multi-party democracy पे based जो Weimar Republic की government थी, it was not able to resolve the problems of the Great Depression 1929, right? And this resulted in even greater popularity for Hitler. Why? Because this government came under huge attack by Hitler, right? So failure of the democratic government, sense of huge amount of humiliation by the Treaty of Versailles, plus you have great oratory skills, that is charisma of Hitler and in general other fascist leaders also, That is, they are great orators. They are able to attract masses like anything, right? So mostly, this Mussolini was also good. He had his charisma, right? Your Hitler, he also had his charisma. So therefore, as a result, because of these factors, a humiliating treaty of Versailles, right? Democratic governments failing to resolve the people, issues of the people because of the because they are not able to solve the problems created by the Great Depression, plus charisma of Hitler, right? All of these things, basically they resulted in rise of Hitler. Therefore, there was rise of Hitler. This is one of the component, right? Apart from that, there was, when Hitler came to power, there was something called policy of appeasement. And this appeasement, it further made fascists or Hitler stronger and popular. Some examples are there. For example, in 1936, Abyssinia or Ethiopia, it is attacked by Mussolini randomly to take revenge of 1896. Actually, he wanted a colony which can act as a source of raw material and as an export market, right? The world does not do anything. Why? Because they fear war. Why? Because wars, they mean huge amount of expenditure. So, no, we are suffering from Great Depression 1929. We do not want war right now. This is a stand taken by the democratic countries, right? So therefore, they are tolerating the aggression of the fascists, right? This is called appeasement, right? Hitler, for example, he will break Treaty of Versailles, right? Treaty of Versailles said you will no arms, no money, no territory, only war guilt. Army was reduced. Hitler will build one of the largest armies, right? Within a few years, he will build an army of 6 lakh men. Is the world acting? No. Why? Because Great Depression is there, our economy is down, we cannot afford a war, right? Hitler in 1938, he takes over Austria, right? Which is barred by Treaty of Versailles. Does the world do anything? It does not do anything, right? So basically, so the people, they are cheering Hitler. Yay, Hitler, yay, awesome man, you are the one who will give us pride, right? So therefore, in action, appeasement, that is tolerating aggression, right? And you're tolerating aggression and basically, in fact, tolerating an inaction of League of Nations. League of Nations was United Nations like organization which should have acted, right? So basically tolerating aggression and inaction of the League of Nations, right? These resulted in more popularity, and therefore the democratic system, it came under threat. Now, fear of communism, it also contributed. So what is happening? When communism, it wants end of property class. So when there is fear of communism because of rise of communism, so this led to greater support. For fascist leaders. So I'm using Hitler as a synonym for fascist, greater support for fascist leaders, right? This kind of scenario, right? Example, this is, let's say Japan. Japan was also fascist. On the left hand side of Japan, there is China. And here, there is USSR. So USSR is very close to Japan. So now what happened? Japanese economy was export-oriented economy. But 1920 Great Depression means no one wants to buy. Right? No one wants to buy. Or basically 1929 Great Depression, it basically hurt the export-oriented economy of Japan. Therefore, it will lead to what? It will lead to unemployment. When factories are not selling anything, why the factories? They will hire anyone. Unemployment among workers. These workers, communism, it promises a wonderland to the workers, right? So therefore, this resulted in what? This resulted in fear of communist revolution. Fear of communist revolution, which resulted in what? It resulted in 1931, Japan became fascist. That is military, General Tojo, right? Military, it took over, it removed the government, democratically elected government, and public support was there of the propertied class to the military. Right, this kind of scenario it is there. So therefore, you see, when there is fear of communism, so those people who hate communism, they supported the fascist leaders. So this is how also fascism came to. So this was a process through which fascism, it threatened, or it came into existence and it threatened this kind of scenario. तो उस तरीके से हम बात कर सकते हैं, ठीक है. Then right, then there is one question which is there. एंड थोड़ा सा जल्दी रैप अप करेंगे, इसको लेट हो गया. पॉलिटिकल एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रिओर्गनाइजेशन ऑफ द स्टेट्स एंड टेरिटरीज, दैट इज पॉलिटिकल एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव, पॉलिटिकल एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रिओर्गनाइजेशन. एंड दो चीजों का रिओर्गनाइजेशन है, स्टेट्स एंड टेरिटरीज, स्टेट्स एंड टेरिटरीज, right, has been a continuous ongoing process since the mid 19th century. माने कि since 1850 onwards it has been a continuous process. It has been a continuous process. Discuss with examples, right? Now इसमें anything specific to India has not been mentioned, right? So there can be a confusion. Some people may answer it from the perspective of India, some people may answer it from the perspective of the world, because if you look at the syllabus of your world history, then reorganization of states, it is a topic, right? It is a topic, and here nothing related to India it is mentioned, nothing related to India it is mentioned, right? So basically how do we answer this, right, if we answer it from the world history perspective? So basically from the world history perspective, the answer becomes this. Actually, since after your French Revolution of 1789, right, there was a rise of nationalism. There was a rise of nationalism. And this nationalism, it basically implied what? It implied desire for ethnicity-based countries, or desired for self-determination. Self-determination and own country. That means Poles, they are feeling they should be having a Poland. Germans, they will feel that they should be united as one Germany. Italians are feeling that Austrians, they should go away. So basically, own country. If we are Czechs, we should have a Czech Republic. If we are Slavs, we should have a Yugoslavia. So this desire is rising, that nation is summation of people who feel one. So we as a nation, we should have one country and one particular state, this kind of system, right? So this is what is happening. And now our question is about 1850s, right? So you say desire for self-determination, and this manifested itself in the form of revolts, for democracy, revolts for democracy, for revolts for anti-colonialism in Europe. For example, Greece was under Ottoman Empire, Belgium was under Netherlands, ऐसा था, anti-colonialism, and unification in the case of Germany and Italy. Multiple Italian kingdoms were there, people, they wanted to be one, right? And when in the year 1830 and in the year 1848. So we have come to the year 1848. So this becomes our introduction, right? Aisa. So therefore this is the energy of nationalism which is going to result in reorganization of the states and reorganization of the territories, right? For example, if you talk about, now you can begin with examples, right? If you talk about France, so France is a very good example of this. For example, in 1848 to 1852, Second Republic was established. So इसके लिए आपको थोड़ा सा आइडिया होना चाहिए फ्रांस का. एग्जाम में तो आप सिंपली इसको एज काफी फैक्चुअल क्वेश्चन बनेगा. Until your 1815, Napoleon was there. After 1815, old monarchy came back, right? Then from 1830 there were revolts, but nothing happened. 1848 there was a revolt, so success of revolt, and Napoleon III के under Second Republic it is being established, right? So see the question, reorganization of state. So republic is a form of a state. Reorganization of territory, it means addition or deletion of territory. So both kind of scenarios we need to look at, right? So second republic. Then in 1852, Napoleon III declared himself as the emperor. So from 1852 until your 1870, there was monarchy in France. Napoleon III was Bhatija of original Napoleon. Then in 1871 until your 1940, this is known as Third Republic. So what happened here? Actually Hitler attacked, and as a result, the republic ended. But Hitler is ultimately defeated. So from 1946 until your 1958, there is Fourth Republic. Then from 1958, there was some constitutional change. Charles de Gaulle was a military leader. He wanted more power to the president, right? And कुछ था situation. Algeria में कुछ हो रहा था. ठीक है. Anyways, from 1958 onwards, it is now Fifth Republic. So you see, this France has undergone this states change multiple times, right? Yes, sir. Similarly, if you talk about then next Germany, right? So in the case of Germany, unification of Germany took place. So this is now reorganization of territory. Unification of Germany took place in the year 1870. In the year 1870, right? You can mention that unification of Italy, it took place in the year 1870, and both of them, they were in the form of what kind of state system? Constitutional monarchy. They unified in the form of a constitutional monarchy, right? Then apart from this, if you talk about, for example, time wise agar chale, so if you talk about Japan, right? Aisa, if you talk about Japan, so अच्छा इसमें एक और चीज़ है, जापान से पहले एक और चीज़ लिख सकते हैं, एंड ये क्या है? इन 1870 एल्जैक लोरेन of France, it was taken over by Germany. There was a war, Franco-Prussian War, right? Franco-Prussian War. Franco means France, Prussian, P, Russia means Germany. So Alsace-Lorraine, it was taken over, right? Then if you look at Japan, so in the case of Japan, there was a change in state represented by a topic which you study in world history, which is called as Meiji Restoration. Basically, Meiji Restoration, it resulted in strong center. It resulted in strong center, right? It resulted in strong center, and later on they also brought a constitution, right? Which basically resulted in constitutional monarchy, right? Aisa constitutional monarchy hai. That constitution, it came in the year 1889. Okay? Strong center was created through the Meiji Restoration. That is one of the aspects, right? After that, if you notice, for example, 1870 onwards, as stability it is coming in Europe, अब वो कैसे आ रहा है मैं उतना डिटेल में नहीं जा सकता, टाइम भी खत्म हो रहा है. 1870 onwards, there was something called scramble for Africa, right? Scramble for Africa, and within this scramble for Africa, there was this conference called Berlin Conference in 1885, where all the European powers, they came together and they divided the Africa, in among each other, right? So therefore, it is Germany, Britain, France, Italy, Portugal, right? These people are basically dividing Africa into their different domains, right? So scramble, this is when you are becoming a colony of someone, and when reorganization is taking place, okay, through it is done via table mapping. That is, they simply took a map of Africa and drew very straight lines. So even till day, the borders of Africa, they are like in straight lines. So there is table mapping, right? And what decided that what will be the who will get what? Basically the power status. So if Britain is more powerful, it will be able to get Egypt and Sudan in the year 1904, right? If Germany is powerful but a rival, so therefore Morocco etc. will go ultimately to France. मतलब वो बहुत सारी वो डिटेल्स हैं, इतना सब इसमें नहीं लग सकते, बट हाँ फ्रैंकली यहाँ पे हम सिंपली इतना ही कह सकते हैं. एंड एट मैक्स यू कैन मेंशन दैट some of the portions. You can mention example, Britain had Sudan and South Africa, and South Africa became a union of South Africa was created in 1911. Egypt is there. Germany Southwest Africa है, Germany East Africa है, Cameroon Togoland है, Portugal Angola Mozambique है, France huge French West Africa है, French Congo है, Tunis है, Italy it has Libya, on the right hand side it has Eritrea, Somaliland. But in the sense, if you know the map, so couple of points you can mention as an example that how Africa was scrambled from 1870 onwards until your 1914. Whole of Africa it is distributed as colonies. It is parceled out as colonies to the European powers. Then in 1898, then, or if you talk about United States of America, ऐसा ले लेते हैं. If you talk about United States of America, so in 1898 there is US versus Spain war, and as a result Central America it is now dominated by United States. Philippines, basically from here Spain is removed, from here Spain is removed, plus United States of America over a period of 1865 onwards, it gradually over a period of time took over Pacific Islands. That is Pacific Ocean on the left hand side of US, so it took over Pacific Islands, right? This kind of situation it is coming. Then if you take example, Asian example, for example China, right? So if you take the example of China, so in 1858 this is river Amur, right? This is river Amur. So all the territory to the north of river Amur was taken over by Russia from China. This formed the border dispute between Russia and China until early 2000s, right? Then in 1894-95 there is a war with Japan, and here Japan takes over Taiwan plus Senkaku Islands, which are today also a dispute. They are taken over by Japan. That is what is happening. Then in 1904-1905 there is Russo-Japanese war, but Korea, which was part of, plus Korea became independent here. Korea was made independent. Then in 1905 Japan is making Korea a protectorate. It is converting Korea. अब ये ठीक है, ये टॉपिक्स ही हैं, मतलब अभी टॉपिक ही ऐसा है. कोरिया इज इक्वल टू प्रोटेक्टोरेट ऑफ जापान. 1910 Korea is annexed by Japan. So this kind of situation is taking place. Then Great Depression happens. Japan economy is under turmoil. It really needs coal from Manchuria. So in 1931 it takes over Manchuria. It attacks China, it takes over Manchuria in 1931. This kind of situation it is taking place if you look at China. Okay. Apart from it, in general you can mention that in Pacific, which all powers were there? Britain was there, right? Germany was there till World War I. After World War I, then it was replaced by Japan. Post World War I, the German Pacific Islands were taken over by Japan. Dutch were present. US was present, right? So these are the powers which are present in the Pacific, right? So territory it is being added to these particular empires. Then you can mention in 1912 and in 1913 there were these Balkan wars, and in the Balkan wars the territory of Balkan Peninsula, it was of Ottoman Empire, was taken over by Montenegro, Serbia, Greece, Bulgaria, right? This kind of situation. Then World War I was fought because of desire for ethnicity based nations, and post World War I what is happening? Poland is created. On the top of Poland there is Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, right, which become independent countries, right? After World War I, USSR is taking birth. That is a change of a state system. Russia is becoming USSR, from monarchy to communist state, right? So that is a state system which is there. Czechoslovakia is being born as a country, right? Czechs and Slovaks, they come together. Yugoslavia is created by merging Montenegro and Serbia, right? A country for Slav people. So Turkey, Ottoman Empire, it is being broken up. Ottoman Empire, it is broken up, right? And it gets converted into a small Turkey. What happens to other countries, for example, Iraq, Iraq, Palestine, Jordan, they become colonies of Britain. France, it gets Syria. So this is all territorial reorganization which is taking place. Then you can mention that in the interwar years, तो ऐसा कुछ नहीं था, हाँ तो बोल सकते हैं, बट हिटलर ने क्या किया? हिटलर ने ऑस्ट्रिया लिया इन 1938, ठीक है. उससे पहले सार मिला इसको 1935 में, वो तो वोटिंग के थ्रू मिला, ठीक है. देन इट इज गेटिंग सुडेटनलैंड ऑफ चेकोस्लोवाकिया in Munich conference 1938, right? Then it is getting what you call as this thing, your Czechoslovakia, he's annexing in 1939, right? Half of Poland he's taking over during the World War II, right? So all of this is doing, half of Poland it goes to USSR, right? Abyssinia is made a colony in 1936 by Mussolini, mention karna kar do, right? Post World War II, what is happening? So post World War II, all the gains of the Hitlers are reversed. Gains of Hitler are reversed, right? So therefore this kind of a scenario it is taking place. So state-wise huge amount of change is taking place. For example, birth of new communist countries take place. ये state का change है क्या? China, it is becoming communist in the year 1949. North Korea, it is coming into operation around 1948-49, ठीक है? It is becoming communist. Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, they are becoming communist by 1954, right? At least half of Vietnam. Then if you see that Eastern Europe, whole of Eastern Europe is converted into communist during the Cold War. Then division wise agar dekha jaye, so division wise is also happening. Palestine and Israel, they are created in 1948. मतलब Israel is created from Palestine in 1948. North Korea, South Korea divided into two in 1948. Why? Because US wants capitalist Korea, USSR wants this Korea. Vietnam is divided into North Vietnam, South Vietnam by 1954. कितना ही करते रहो, ठीक है. So this kind of situation it is there, ठीक है. But overall, this is the situation. Decolonization also, last line you can mention that decolonization resulted in birth of new states. मतलब वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री वाइज तो इट इज लाइक कि टॉपिक्स का जो सिलेबस है वो लिखते चले जाओ, फिर कितना ही लिख दो उसमें, ठीक है ना. दो दिस काइंड ऑफ लास्ट क्वेश्चन विच इज देयर. हाँ तो हो गया पॉलिटिकल, हाँ तो हो गया, यही सारे क्वेश्चंस थे. अगर इंडिया वाले पर्सपेक्टिव से करते हो तो इन द if you are interested in the Indian perspective, so we already have done a video on this particular question from the Indian perspective, right? So if you search last year's video of questions of mains, so from the Indian perspective this question has been handled in that video, right? So that both are available to you. So this is, so that was there. So okay, thank you, God bless you, take care, bye bye.